Ano ba sinabi nila? Huwag kami matakot. Hindi kami takot. Hindi kami takot. Sumasagot lang kami sa kanilang mga atake sa amin. At gusto lang namin ipresenta sa taong bayan ang isang perspective na ginaganito kami dahil we are a threat politically and for power.
But one thing, Mr. Chairman, is extremely clear to this representation. Tayo po ay na-scam sa pamamagitan ng libu-libong acknowledgement receipts na basta-basta lamang dinoktor or gawa-gawa lamang. Mr. Chair, 612,500,000 pesos o mahigit kalahating bilyon. Mr. Chair, ito po ang pondo ng bayan na nawala o hindi ma-explain mula lamang December 2022 hanggang September 2023. 9 na buwan lamang po, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, almost 5,000 acknowledgement receipts of dubious origin. Kapalit ang 612.5 million pesos na confidential funds na basta-basta lang naglaho mula sa kaban ng bayan sa ilalim ng pamumuno ng ating Vice Presidente.
Nadagdagan pa ang katulad ni Marc0S Piattos. Mahigit 1,300 umano'y tumanggap ng confidential funds ng Office of the Vice President or OVP sa ilalim ni Vice President Sara Duterte, ang walang birth record sa Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA. Kamakailan ay humiling si House Committee on Good Government Chairperson Joel Chua sa PSA na beripikahin ang halos 2,000 pangalan na nakalista bilang acknowledgement recipient ng 500 million pesos confidential funds ng OVP. Nito lamang linggo, December 15, nang ilabas ng komite ang tugon ng PSA na may petsang December 11, 2024. Nakasaad sa sulat ng PSA na 1,322 sa mga pangalan ang walang birth record habang 670 pangalan ang most like match o may lumabas na isa o higit pang records ng kapanganakan. Pagdating naman sa record of marriage, 1,456 pangalan daw ang wala sa kanilang tala habang 536 ang most like match. Samantala, 1,593 raw sa mga pangalan ang walang record of death habang 399 ang most like match sa existing records ng PSA. Sinabi ni Chua na ang mga bagong natuklasan ng PSA ay nagbibigay ng matibay na ebidensya na ang mga acknowledgement receipt na isinumite upang ipaliwanag ang 500 million pesos confidential funds ay malamang peke di umano. This certification from the PSA leaves little doubt. If these names cannot be found in the civil registry, it strongly suggests they do not exist. The acknowledgement recipients may have been manufactured to justify the disbursement of confidential funds. Saad pa niya, dagdag pa ni Chua, these findings raise a critical question. If the recipients don't exist, where did the money go? This is not just a clerical error. This points to be a deliberate effort to misuse public funds. Ang beripikasyon ay kasunod ng mga naunang natuklasan ng PSA na nagpakita ng mga pagkakaiba sa mga record na may kinalaman sa hiwalay na 112.5 million pesos confidential fund na ipinamahagi ng Department of Education or DepEd sa panahon ng pangangasiwa ni Duterte bilang kalihim ng DepEd noong 2023. Sa 677 pangalang iniimbestigahan sa kasong iyon, 405 ang walang record ng kapanganakan. Matatandaang kamakailan lamang ay nauna ng isiniwalat ng PSA na wala silang kahit anong record para sa isang personalidad na Marc0S Piattos at Kokoy Villamin na nakipagtransaksyon umano sa opisina ni Duterte. Ang pangalang Marc0S Piattos sa mga resibo ng DepEd ay naging simbolo umano ng pagdududa ng publiko nang tiyakin ng PSA na walang ganitong tao sa kanilang civil registry database. Ang pangalang ito na itinuturing ng marami bilang pinaghalong pangalan ng isang sikat na restaurant at brand ng merienda ay naging simbolo ng mga aligasyong irregularidad sa paggamit ng confidential fund. Ang pangalang Kokoy Villamin ay lumabas sa parehong mga resibo ng OVP at DepEd, ngunit may mga hindi tugmang pirma. Katulad ni Piattos, kinumpirma ng PSA na wala ring record si Villamin sa civil registry na nagpatibay umano ng hinala ng mga gawa-gawang benepisyaryo.
Mr. Chair, ayon sa ating last hearing, we have confirmed the following. The Office of the Vice President has requested for confidential funds for at least 2 years. The documents evidencing payment, or the DPEs, are required to be submitted to support the disbursement of confidential funds. The Commission on Audit relies mainly on DPEs, which is the case of OBP, or ARs. Napaka-importante po nito dahil napapatunayan kung saan at kung paano at kung sino ang tumatanggap ng mga payments na galing sa Office of the Vice President. The COA has confirmed that these documents are noted as submitted out of mere compliance, almost to the point of being ministerial. We have confirmed that these DEPs, despite its key roles in ensuring proper receipt of confidential funds and utilization as indicated in accomplishment reports, has been the documents submitted out of mere compliance, perhaps at the cost of its truth and accuracy. Mr. Chair, I would like to manifest that the purpose of this acknowledgement receipt, at least in theory, is to safeguard the use of confidential funds. Paano po natin maipapakita through sa acknowledgement receipts kung ang tao na tumatanggap nito at kung saan ito napunta at ginagastos? Kahit confidential funds po ito, need po natin bantayan kung paano ito nagagastos at kung paano ito nagagamit. However, despite the intent, an examination of these acknowledgement receipts submitted in the liquidation of the OVP's confidential funds shows the alarming discrepancies and indications of irregularity. Meron pong pagdududa kung saan at paano ginamit ang confidential fund ng OVP. Mr. Chair, meron po ako ipapakita na acknowledgement receipt dated December 2022. Ito po yung documents in evidencing payment. Nakita po natin na walang nakalagay sa acknowledgement receipt na ito, walang nakalagay na date. Bakit po kaya walang date din na nakalagay dito? Naka-blank po yung date. So this acknowledgement receipt was included with ARs dated December 22 or part of the DEPs of 2022. Based on this acknowledgement receipt, it is the auditors were able to determine whether the money was actually issued in 2022. Napakahirap po patunayan kung talagang 2022 nga po ba ginastos o ginamit itong mga ARs na isinabmit ng Office of the Vice President dahil wala nga po itong date. Ano po ba yung nakapaloob sa acknowledgement receipt na ito? Wala rin po itong period covered. So, ano po ang dahilan kung bakit kailangan may nakalagay na period covered sa isang acknowledgement receipt na ito? Tingin ko po kailangan nating malaman para malaman din natin kung kailan at para saan ito ginamit. Kung wala po itong date sa nakikita ninyo, medyo hindi katanggap-tanggap at talagang nakakapagduda kung saan at paano ginamit yung pera na nakalagay po sa acknowledgement receipt na ito. To illustrate to you, I will show you the acknowledgement receipt in the name of a certain AAS who appears 3 times in the acknowledgement receipt on hand. Nakita po natin, bali sa dokumentong isinabmit ng OVP na ipinapakita ko po ngayon, a certain AAS may tinanggap po siya na pera sa loob po ng 2 buwan. From December 2022 to February 2023, almost 210,000 ang tinanggap niya. But from December 2022 to July 2023, nakatanggap si AAS ng 300,000. Maring nakakapagtaka po kung paano at para saan ang ginamit na perang ito. Kasi ang nakalagay po dapat is purchase of information. To reiterate, magkaparehas lang ang purpose ng tatlong ARs. Kung magkaparehas lang, bakit may varying amount sa disbursement? So, napakarami pong katanungan na kailangan nilang sagutin yung mga taong hindi po nagpunta rito at yung mga tao po na iniimbitahan natin at sinasabpina natin. Hindi po ba nakakapagtaka kung bakit may iba't ibang amounts for the same purpose? Purchase of information. Katulad ni AAS, tumanggap siya ng 60,000 noong December 2022, 150,000 noong February 2023, at 70,000 noong 2023. In another set of ARs, Mr. Chairman, may isa pang tao na by initials ay JOV, which received the confidential funds for three different purposes. For the payments of reward, medicine in December 2022, for the payment of supplies in 2023, and the provisions of medical and food aid in 2023. Nakatanggap si JOV ng 920,000 sa loob ng 5 buwan for three different purposes: payment of reward of medicine, payment of supplies, and provision of medical and food aid. Ano ang total na natanggap ni JOV base tatlong ARs na ipinakita ko sa screen? Ito ay 920,000. Unlike AAS, ang pera na tinanggap ni JOV ay para sa tatlong separate purpose: payment of rewards and medicine, payment of supplies, provision of medical and food aid. Marami pong mga katulad ni JOV na tumanggap ng confidential fund na galing sa Office of the Vice President. Nakapagtataka na may isang tao na tumanggap ng confidential fund na twice o thrice para sa iba't ibang purposes. Nakapagtaka din kung saan ito nanggagaling. Ang galing-galing naman ng tao na yon, marami silang businesses na sobrang swak na kinakailangan ng Office of the Vice President. Or baka pwede natin mas magandang katanungan is hindi ba kayo nagtataka kung bakit paulit-ulit ang pangalan? Halatang halata na para ang Office of the Vice President ay naubusan na ng pangalan na ilalagay. Mr. Chair, please allow me to point out to a pattern that we found out in the documents evidencing payment for December of 2022. There is a very real possibility that the confidential fund were released in batches daily na parang routine na ito o robotic pa. Parang scripted ang pag-release ng mga pondong ito. Tignan po natin yung na ifa-flash po natin sa ating screen. This shows a pattern that occurs throughout the DEPs in December of 2022. Nakikita po natin na halos pare-parehas po ang amount na ito at talagang grabe po yung kanilang ginawa para sa reward medicine. Nagre-repeat po ito ng December 29 and December 30 and even occurs many more times during this period. Nakikita nyo rin po na never ninyo pinansin itong pattern kahit the same amount, same dates, and several times. Kaya hindi po ba nakakapagduda, lalong-lalo na po sa Commission on Audit, na paulit-ulit po na pare-parehas ang amount, pare-parehas ang nakalagay, lalong-lalo na sa kanilang mga DEPs. Mr. Chair, let us not forget that these confidential funds were spent all in 11 days. This pattern in releasing the confidential funds in batches show exactly how all the 125 million of confidential funds were fully spent. Mr. Chair, we have shown you the importance of the DEPs more than being a required document for the disbursement of confidential funds. And the DEPs isa sa mga dokumento na dapat meron tayong integridad, at dapat nating binabantayan dahil ito ang nagpapatunay sa maayos na paggamit ng confidential funds. Paano natin, how can the integrity of the receipt and the use of confidential fund be safeguarded pag walang maayos na mga nakalagay sa ating mga acknowledgement receipt or pag hindi nababasa ng maayos yung acknowledgement receipt. Mr. Chair, dapat po talaga na humarap na yung mga tao na ating sinusubpina, na ating pinapatawag dito sa na naka-destino o naka-assign sa office ng Vice President. Sana po, Mr. Chair, wag na po nilang pagtakpan ang ating Vice President dahil nakikita naman po natin na marami po talagang irregularidad na nakikita, lalong-lalo na sa kung paano nila ginamit ang kanilang confidential fund ng Department of Education at saka ng Office of the Vice President. Huwag po nilang pagtakpan ang iisang tao lamang. Dapat po ang loyalty nila para po sa interest ng bansa, hindi po sa isang tao lamang. Yun lang po. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair.
I will not be raising any questions. Rather, I would just like to point out a very important manifestation, which I believe is very important and vital for our proceedings. No? Kaunting backtrack lang po tayo. Over the past hearings, Mr. Chair, we've discussed the contents of the accomplishment reports, and I'm sure we all have copies of that, at kung sino ang naghahanda at pumipirma ng mga ito. And as we have confirmed, ang naghahanda at pumipirma ng mga ito ay yung SDO and yung head ng agency. Mr. Chair, allow me to point out what the certification attached to the accomplishment report means for the SDO and the Vice President herself as head of the agency. Meron ba yung slide natin para makita ng ating mga manonood? So, Mr. Chair, itong pinapakita natin ay part ng certification na naka-attach sa mga liquidation reports na na sinasubmit mismo ng SDO at ng ating Vice President. Okay? We have 4 copies from the period of December 21 to 31, 2022, from Feb 6 to March 29, 2023, from April 25 to June 2023, and from July 14 to September 14, 2023, all of which amount to 125 million. So, apat na 125 million po ito na sinocertify po nila, nakapirma po silang dalawa dyan, and may I emphasize on Section B. Expenses were incurred in connection with the agency's intelligence and/or confidential operations and activities with supporting documents attached to the liquidation of confidential funds and for the intelligence funds, documentary evidence of payment kept in sealed envelope in the vault in the office of the SDO. This only means, Mr. Chair, that the signatories of these liquidation or accomplishment reports, which is a sworn document, certify na yung cash advances here amounting to 500 million pesos, representing the confidential funds, were used for the implementation of the OVP initiatives, and as COA has pointed out in the past hearings, they do not verify or determine whether the information in the DEPs, the amount, the signature, name in the receipt, the date sa receipt, are truths, lies, or are reasonable or unreasonable. The only persons who are able to verify kung totoo talaga ang mga acknowledgement receipts na ito, Mr. Chair, ay ang Office of the Vice President, particularly the head of the office, which is the Vice President herself, and the Special Disbursing Officer. With this, Mr. Chair, it's rather very evident that through the certification attached to this, nakikita natin dito, accomplishment reports, the ARs na kino-question kanina are impliedly verified by the Vice President herself and the SDO. Nevertheless, Mr. Chair, naniniwala po ang inyong lingkod na mahalaga na usisain pa rin natin at tingnan ang veracity ng mga acknowledgement receipts na pinresenta nila, and at the end of the day, na kahit ito po ay confidential or intelligence funds man, ito ay pondo pa rin po ng ating pamahalaan intended para sa ating mga kababayan. With this, Mr. Chair, I yield the floor to the next interpellator.
Do you have another Comsec? Sino pa yung isa?
Kong Hun.
Congressman Jeff Kung-hun, you recognize, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, just a few questions lang po to continue. I think the committee should expressed its interest by asking already in Land Bank na pagtaka po talaga yung issue po of the money trail. I think we have established that the cash withdrawn from the Land Bank representing the confidential funds are taken out by the SDO in cash. Hindi pa napadeposit sa Land Bank. And it is in the personal cost of the SDO, which is in line with the joint circular. However, this is 125 million in cash, and in the case of DepEd, 37.5 million per quarter in cold hard cash. But what is not sure yet is where Ms. Acosta and Mr. Fajardo have brought the cash. I think we've established the line so far with the tellers. We're still going to have to establish that, at least from the Land Bank up until the deposit. From the release of the check up to the encashment in Land Bank, we've seen that so far, but we still have yet to establish where the cash goes after that. And we have some further questions po in relation to this. Kasi po, ang nakikita po natin, based on the testimonies, even from the last hearing, in the question of confidential funds, it all points to two people po. In the case of DepEd, at least, it's pointing to the SDO and the head of agency, in which case that would be Mr. Fajardo and then Secretary Duterte. And of course, for the OVP, although interestingly, based on our last hearing, it actually was pointed to three people. If we recall the testimony of Attorney Sanchez, she actually mentioned that, based from her knowledge, the persons who would have knowledge of this confidential funds would be the SDO, si Ms. Acosta, the head of agency, which is VP Duterte, and the Chief of Staff, Ms. Zuleika Lopez. So in line with this, just to clarify, I'd like to ask a few questions po, no, kay Attorney Lopez, to the Honorable Chairman. Attorney Lopez, nabanggit po yung pangalan po ninyo last hearing. Just to refresh your memory, I'm sure at the time you were busy po with your personal concerns. We were asking si Attorney Sanchez po and si Ms. Ville Del Rey about the processes within the OVP and the disbursement of the confidential funds. And it was mentioned, I believe, specifically by Attorney Sanchez, what we've established, at least with Ms. Ville Del Rey, is that wala po silang kinalaman sa disbursement ng confidential funds. Ang alam lang po ng chief accountant is the requirements and that they would have to submit for the release of the check. And kasama rin po dito si Attorney Sanchez. However, Attorney Sanchez, I believe, made that statement that past that point, and what we've established with the Land Bank, the personalities involved with the confidential funds would be the SDO, the VP, and yourself. However, we take note po, Ms. Lopez, to the Honorable Chairman, most respectfully, na binigit po ninyo that you're only concerned with operations. And by operations, you're talking, I guess, about the social amelioration program ng Office of the Vice President. Is that correct, Ms. Lopez?
That is correct, Your Honor. That is my role as Undersecretary and Chief of Staff of the Office of the Vice President.
Ms. Lopez, I hope you Attorney Lopez, I hope you understand how we would be how we would find that quite confusing, because generally the idea of a chief of staff would be second to the head of the agency, and by virtue of that, everyone else in that department would be under the chief of staff. Generally, that's how it works. Our understanding is that in the OVP, how many USEC positions are there, may we ask?
There's only one undersecretary position, Your Honor.
And the undersecretary position is that of the Chief of Staff, correct?
That is correct.
So generally, including the SDO, although they have specific responsibilities under the circular regarding to the confidential funds, they are still under your supervision as the USEC.
The SDOs, Your Honor, do not report to me.
They don't report to you, although
do.
you are the most senior official after the Vice President in the...
Your Honor, if I may be allowed to, Sir Congressman Gutierrez, if I may be allowed to explain my answer. In the Office of the Vice President, although I am the Undersecretary and the Chief of Staff, I am purely handling, as I mentioned, operational concerns. There are areas, for example, that I am not privy to. One of which is the matter of confidential expenses. But as regards the institutionalization of the projects, implementation of the projects, communications that come through the office, internal, issuances of memo, issuances of special orders, etc., they go through me. And also, for external communications, Your Honor, for example, there is a request for referral to the, for example, the DSWD or the Department of Health. All these matters, Your Honor, are coursed to the Office of the Chief of Staff. And all communications emanate also from the Office of the Chief of Staff, external, especially to those national government agencies. On top of that, Your Honor, I handle the day-to-day operations of, there is a clustering in the Office of the Vice President. For example, as I'm, in the case of Director Lynn, she handles the finance cluster, which is budget, accounting, GSD, no? It's under you. The procurement. That is her AOR. On my end, Your Honor, I handle the frontline delivery of administrative support such as Disaster Operations Center, Legal Affairs Division, and also the protocol team. Those are matters that I have direct hand into and information I am privy to. So yun lang po yung aking areas of concern. And there are areas actually in the Office of the Vice President, katulad, for example, let me just cite, if you allow me, sir, the matter of the appointments or the scheduling of the courtesy calls, etc., on the Vice President. Although it may be true that high-ranking officials call me and say na, USEC, attorney, confirm mo naman yung aming appointment with the Vice President. This is something that I have no say, direct say to, because this is all done by the appointments team. In the same manner, the protocol team of the Vice President, although all the members of the Diplomatic Corps call me as the head of the agency, as the highest official, and as the Chief of Staff, it does not guarantee them that there will be a scheduled courtesy call, because these are matters that are determined purely on that end. So it's I think it's a compartmentalized kind of setup, Your Honor, that there are only certain functions and tasks that I am privy to. In which case, that is the one that I have mentioned earlier. But although I would wish to answer really respectfully as regards the matter of the confidential expenses, it is something that I have not really been privy to from the very beginning. So, in the case of the earlier questions by Congressman Acop, rather, it is something that I cannot really answer because I am not privy to the disbursement, utilization, nor liquidation of the confidential funds. So, ganun po siya, Your Honor. That is how it is run in the Office of the Vice President.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Attorney Lopez. Well, I only mentioned
Thank
that
you.
because it was the words of Attorney Sanchez that mentioned that you would probably be privy to the disbursement. And I think it would be understandable. It would be an understandable statement on the part of Attorney Sanchez, because the general understanding of a chief of staff
Okay.
and being the sole USEC of that agency,
Yes.
there would be an understanding that there would be certain that you would have overall supervision. Well, in relation to the SDOs and in line with the circular, we also understand that they have specific responsibilities only to them. But we can't help but be puzzled po, no? And I understand you're telling us now that it's compartmentalized, but still we would think that generally the head of the agency would course things through you. Although necessarily separate yung sa issue ng disbursement of the SDO, wouldn't other matters regarding the SDO, for example, administrative or human resources or logistics-wise, are they not coursed through you in relation to SDO? Because if I'm understanding it correctly, the job of the SDO would also entitle a lot of travel. As you've pointed out earlier, I mean, we've seen that maraming travel orders po ang ating SDO to the point na wala rin po siya today on the because of official travel po, no? So, in relation to that, there's a lot of intermingling pa rin. Although you might say compartmentalized, there are a lot of things that would go through you. I would understand the travel orders are signed by the Assistant Chief of Staff right now only because you were gone for the longest time. But generally, you would be signing off on the travel orders of the SDO. Would that be a fair statement?
Your Honor, I do not sign off on the travel orders of certain officials, or in this case, the SDO. May I just confirm kung sino lang yung pwede kong pirmahan na travel authority? Just sa ODX, ha? Oh. In my case, Your Honor, in the case of the Office of the Vice President, I can only sign off on the travels of Directors Lynn Sanchez and Director Baloro, who is the Director for Operations. All the other travel authorities, I do not sign off on them. It is HR. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, Attorney Lopez, you're telling us now that even sa pag-sign ng travel orders, may clustering pa po kayo. You are only authorized to issue travel orders for these two officials, and then everyone else has different parang boss. Ganun po ba yung sistema sa OVP? I hope you'd understand the confusion, because we were presented before an organization and it all seemed to be like a pyramid, downstream lahat. Although there are clusters, everything's under you. But now we're seeing that there are limits to your responsibility. Are we understanding this correctly?
Your Honor, in the Office of the Vice President, we have a certain delegation of authority. There's only certain papers or documents that get into the Office of the Chief of Staff. And there are also others that go directly to the Office of Director Sanchez, as well as the Office of Director for Operations.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Lopez, could you please guide us through also? Ano po yung ibang clusters? I think you mentioned financial, appointment, protocol. Operations, of course, is what you're in charge of. What are the other clusters so that we have an idea? So, in line with that, Attorney Lopez, so what you're saying now is confirming what Attorney Poa told us earlier, that if you take a deeper look into the OVP, napaka-compartmentalized. He used the same term, actually. It's very compartmentalized sa OVP. So you are affirming that now po?
Yusek Poa said,
The compartmentalized po yung OVP. Sometimes, what the left hand does, the right hand doesn't know. Parang what si Attorney Poa, while spokesperson, should be expected to know the ins and outs of the office, because precisely as spokesperson, he will be relaying this information to the public. When we were asking him, he said compartmentalized po. He does not know about confidential funds. So you now, as the Chief of Staff, you are now confirming ng OVP po, despite the hierarchy that we see in the official organization chart, napaka-compartmentalized pala po yung OVP.
yes, that is correct, Your Honor. I can only speak for my experience as the Chief of Staff. I cannot really speak for Attorney Poa, because there are certain areas in the OVP that I have no information on, or I cannot really have a direct hand on how it all operates. Your
So,
Honor.
Mr. Chair, in the operation of the OVP, rather than the usual hierarchy where it's a pyramid, where you have the large base with information or data or operations, which passes information upwards to select supervisors, upwards again to director level, ASEC, USEC, and finally to the VP. You're telling us now that the OVP operates in a hub and spoke type of situation, wherein the OVP is central and then direct na lang po siya to the different. For example, OVP direct kay spokesperson, direct kay Chief of Staff, direct kay Attorney Sanchez, for operating different clusters. And each cluster doesn't know what the other is doing.
Uh, I can only answer, Your Honor, on my role as the Chief of Staff.
Yes. Sorry, and I'll just add to that point. No? And I understand you can only speak as the Chief of Staff because what you're telling us now is that you have been compartmentalized only as the Chief of Staff. So now you're telling me what I'm trying to present now, and if you would agree with that, is that the VP is very hands-on but treats you separately. So there's like I said, the hub and spoke. The VP is in the center, and she deals directly with Attorney Poa for other matters which you might not know, then directly with you for Chief of Staff of Operations for matters that only you know, directly to Attorney Sanchez for matters that only the finance would know, and you don't coordinate with each other.
There are cases, Your Honor, that is, in my experience, that is the case. For example, in the case of the spokesperson, it is not something that I am also privy to. The instructions for the OVP spokesperson. It happens, Your Honor, that way.
Thank you. I think this will be more, the compartmentalization of the OVP will be more relevant as we go on. But I'll just go back and focus on the SDOs. Thank you very much, Attorney Lopez.
Okay, thank
So
you.
yun po, we had an idea, although Attorney Sanchez mentioned that 3 persons were involved with the SDO, it seems to be narrowed down po, no? It looks to be, like with the DepEd, it's 2 people. We have SDO Gina Acosta and the head of agency, which is the Vice President. So, para sa kalaman po ng lahat, yung joint circular, it dictates there that the SDO is personally tasked with the disbursement and liquidation of confidential funds. And the head of agency is personally tasked to oversee. So what Attorney Lopez has told us now, by excusing herself or by separating herself from the operations of the confidential fund, it now affirms what is in the joint circular. It is down to these 2 people. And in other words, yung SDO po yung inaatasan ng batas natin na humawak at siguraduhin mapunta ang confidential funds sa naayon na confidential expenses. So this is all in line with the circular. So since we have questions ideally for the SDO, but given that Ms. Acosta is not here, I'd like to ask these questions to Attorney Camora. Apologies, Attorney Camora. All roads lead to the COA, so I'll have to ask you in relation to the circular. So we are affirming po, no? We affirm po that with the joint circular, it's usually the SDO. It's only the SDO who is tasked with the disbursement of the confidential funds.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
To put more meat into this, we'd like to present po yung certification, if the Secretariat would be so kind as to flash it. The certifications for the OVP and the DepEd. Sorry, this is in relation to the certification for the confidential funds. I think we have one sample dated January 10, 2022. And for the DepEd, we have one sample dated March 31, 2023. Not there. So, Attorney Camora, through the Chair, most respectfully, ito po yung certification na sinasabi po natin. This is what is submitted together with the liquidation report. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And this is precisely provided under the joint circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
This is the exact language po, no? Is this an annex to the joint circular, or is there a format that is provided?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's Annex B of the joint circular.
So as Annex B, even if the correct signatories are there, for example, it's signed by the SDO and signed by the head of agency and properly notarized, if it has been altered in any way that any of the provisions under the certification are different, di nyo po tatanggapin. It has to be worded precisely as Annex B provides. Tama po ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And it would require all of these signatures,
Yes,
such as
Mr.
the head
Chair.
of agency. So, we take note po that means that there are very specific things that are required to be certified as to be submitted with the liquidation report. And some of the things that stand out, it says here po, and I quote, incurred by the undersigned. So, ibig sabihin po rito, it is the SDO that personally handles and disperses the money.
Yes, Mr.
That is
Chair.
basically the crux of the certification. And it just comes with other caveats.
Yes,
Like, for
Mr.
example, first, what is spent is in connection with the agency's intelligence and or confidential operations and activities. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And it also says that, two, it cannot be used for payment of salaries, wages, overtime, additional compensation, allowance, or other fringe benefits of officials and employees.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And third, that the expenditures are necessary and utilized for legal purposes.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So this means that the SDO should personally know the disbursements and the expenses incurred, and that he should have personal knowledge of all of this. That is basically what the certification is saying.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And this, hand in hand with the liquidation reports, would affirm again the responsibility of the SDO to disburse the confidential fund in accordance with the provisions of the circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Since the SEO handles the fund personally, it necessarily follows that he gives the money. Is that correct? And I believe you answered this with Congresswoman Garin.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You mentioned actually that there could be possibly multiple SDOs.
They could designate many SDOs.
From all of our agencies po and departments and GOCCs that would have CIF or IF, how many po would have only one SDO?
Actually, Mr. Chair, most have only one SDO. It is the agencies that have multiple SDOs that are fewer.
Okay, so mostly have one SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And in that case, that SDO is the one in charge pa rin of paying, and it cannot be delegated further.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, for example, if we have an informer, which is basically what the CIF is for, no? If you have an informer who needs to be paid, it is the SDO who personally pays this to them.
That is the presumption.
That is the
based
presumption.
on the certification, Mr. Chair.
And based on the requirements of the circular, it cannot be delegated. So the presumption should be reality. No?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And that is the understanding of the COA.
Yes,
That
Mr.
it is
Chair.
them who personally handles it. And it is them who personally receives the acknowledgement receipt.
Yes,
Exactly.
Mr. Chair.
So the SDO cannot give it to another employee, for example, out of the 125 million, a specific, for example, compartmentalized daw, clustering. So ikaw sa rewards of medicine, ito, 20 million. And then siya na po yung in charge sa, and then whatever ARs that delegated person would receive would pass it on to the SDO. That is not allowed under the circular.
Even if he or she does that, he or she is the one ultimately accountable for those funds based on his or her certification. So, it's under his responsibility pa rin po.
Yes. So basically, command responsibility siya pa rin. But if that
Yes,
were the case, that is not in line with the circular because it should be personally disbursed by
Yes,
the SDO.
Mr.
Correct.
Chair.
So we can't be too sure that the SDO, if it were the case that it were delegated, the SDO would not be able to certify it in such a manner. Because
Yes,
supposedly
Mr. Chair.
it's saying there that he's the one who actually disbursed the money.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And this is the same for payments of rewards. This is not just for the handling of funds in general. Even for
Yes,
payments of
Mr.
rewards and information, it goes the same way.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
The SDO gives payment directly to the recipient, and the recipient is supposed to give the AR or any DEPs that are in relation to that. Ms. Camora, Attorney Camora, so these acknowledgement receipts were submitted by the OVP and the DepEd to COA. This is the proof, this is the documentary evidence of payment that is required by the circular. And now we have that understanding that you confirmed now that the SDO personally handles the same. So they handle the funds and they handle personally the DEPs.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, if there's any doubt to the confidential funds, if there is any doubt at all to the DEPs, any doubts to the ARs, which have been hammered down in the last hearing and now in this hearing, this all points down to the SDO. This is their personal responsibility under the joint circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, for example, one of the things that we pointed out last time in relation to the dates, if there is any problem with the date of the AR, it should have passed to the SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Because unlike, for example, in our usual po natin, Attorney Camora, let's say, in a usual transaction, pumunta ka sa mall, bumili ka ng pagkain, magbibigay ng resibo, you wouldn't pay a second thought on that OR because usually you don't have to liquidate it anywhere. It's just a piece of paper. But as an SDO in which you have a personal responsibility, nakataya pera mo pa rin kasi nakaband ka po to the treasury.
Yes, Mr.
So
Chair.
you would have to check and make sure that all of the ARs are accurate,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
including the date.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Since one of the responsibilities under the joint circular is to disburse the CF and IF in accordance with the provisions of the circular.
Yes. So in the circular, it requires an acknowledgement receipt, and an acknowledgement receipt would require the date. So the date having been filled in for the AR and received by the SDO has the responsibility to make sure that it is correct.
Yes, Mr. Chair, although the requirement is documentary evidence.
Documentary evidence.
of
So
payment.
I'm sorry, but yes, the AR as the DEP
Yes,
would be
Mr. Chair.
required to have gone under scrutiny of the SDO. So if we had 158 ARs which have a supposed typographical error, shouldn't the SDO have caught on, since they personally gave the money and received the receipt? He would check the receipt. Kung tama yung pangalan, may signature, tama yung purpose, and the date. So the 158 times na mali yung date, supposedly 158 times na dumaan po ito sa SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So with that, we'd like to ask the COA. I know we've asked this before already, but we're looking into the responsibility of the COA. You've already mentioned many times that the ICFA would only be concerned with the submission of the DEPs, and that you wouldn't look no further because generally parang ministerial na lang to a point. Mr.
But
Chair,
should it
just a
have
few
raised
questions
some
on red
red
flags
to
po,
continue?
especially now in
I think
hindsight,
the committee should express its
typographical errors.
interest by asking already in Land Bank.
Well,
Nakapagtaka po talaga yung issue po of the money trail. I
because
think
of this,
we have established that the cash
our
withdrawn from the
hearings
Land Bank representing the confidential
you're kind
funds
of,
are taken out by the SDO in cash. Hindi pa
looking into
napadeposit
this,
sa Land
that
Bank.
we should be,
And it is in the personal
stricter
cost of the
on
SDO, which is in line with
our
the joint
audit
circular.
from now on.
However, this is 125 million
We
in
understand
cash,
po, no, you
and in the
mentioned
case of
before that
DepEd,
one of the
37.5
limitations of
million
your office
per
is
quarter
manpower.
in cold
And I
hard
think
cash.
Yes,
one
Mr.
thing that
But
the
what is
committee
not
will be
sure
working
yet
on
is
in
where
legislation
Mr.
is to strengthen
Ms.
for the
Acosta
COA
and
that
Mr.
you would
Fajardo
have
have
the
brought the
proper
cash. I
manpower
think we've
support to make
established
sure that this does not
the
happen
line
again.
so far
I
with
think
the
that's one
tellers.
thing
We're still going to
personally
have to
for
establish that at least
representation
from the
would like
Land
to
Bank
push
up
forward for
until
the
the deposit,
consideration.
from the release of the check
But with that said,
up to the
so
encashment in
I
Land
hope now
Bank.
the
We've
ICFA
seen
will
that so
take
far,
into special
but we still have yet to
consideration not
establish
only
where the
the
cash goes after that.
possibility
And we have
of
some
typographical
further
errors,
questions po in
the
relation to this.
frequency
Kasi
of it
po, ang nakita
occurring,
po
the time
natin,
span in which it
based on the
happens. And of
testimonies,
course,
even
now,
from the
as
last
mentioned by
hearing,
Congressman Adjong,
in the question of
we've seen
confidential
earlier
funds,
there are
it
problems
all
even
points
to
to
the
two people po.
multiple
In the
names
case
with
of
different
DepEd, at
signatures.
least, it's
This
pointing
should
to
have
the
raised a red
SDO
flag. And of
and
course,
the head of
the
agency, in
bogus
which
names
case that
that
would
were
be
raised by
Mr.
Congressman
Fajardo
Acop,
and
such as Mary
then
Piattos.
Secretary
So these are things
Duterte.
that I hope that the
And of
ICFA
course,
would
for the
be
OVP,
more
although
stringent.
interestingly,
But there's one more
based on our
matter,
last
aside from
hearing,
that,
it actually was
which we have
pointed to
brought up
three
in the
people.
previous hearing,
If we
that I
recall
hope that you
the
would consider.
testimony of
Upon
Attorney
studying
Sanchez,
po yung
she actually
DEPs
mentioned that
natin, and we've already
based from her
we already know
knowledge,
there's a question
the
about
persons who would have
time span in
acknowledged
which
this
was
confidential
dispersed.
funds would
Alam
be the
natin,
SDO,
questionable
si Ms.
yung
Acosta,
11 days
the
na
head of
5 days
agency,
pa nga
which
po
is
ay
VP
holiday,
Duterte,
dispersed
and
po ito lahat.
the chief of staff,
But one
Mr.
more thing
Laika
we'd
Lopez.
consider,
So
now
in
that
line
you
with
have
this,
affirmed
just to
to us, now that
clarify,
we
I'd like to
understand it better,
ask
na
a
yung
few questions
SDO
po, no?
is
Kay,
personally in charge of
Attorney
dispersing the
Lopez,
funds.
to the Honorable Chairman.
We collated po yung ating mga
Attorney
DPs,
Lopez,
and
nabanggit
we've
po yung
seen
pangalan
po,
po ninyo
for
last hearing,
example,
just to
for
refresh
this
your
is,
memory. I'm
I
sure at the
think,
time you were
the
busy po with your
DepEd. So this
personal
would be by Mr. Fajardo.
concerns. We
For
were
the,
asking si Attorney Sanchez po
I
and
believe this is
si
the first
Ms.
quarter
Villa
of
Del Rey
2023,
about the processes
submitted
within the
on the
OVP
31st of
and
March.
there were
Disbursements
disbursements
of the,
every day po, no? Confidential
since the
funds.
release of the cash.
And it was mentioned,
And
I
that
believe,
disbursements, they would
specifically
go,
by
not
Attorney
go
Sanchez.
less than
What
10
we've
times a
established,
day
at
po.
least with Ms. Villa
If you
Del
could
Rey,
see po in the
is
chart,
that wala
this
po
is what
silang
we've,
kinalaman
seen.
sa
You would notice
disbursement
that the ARs,
ng
it would say the
confidential
address or
funds. Ang
location.
alam lang
This
po
is one
ng
thing
chief
particularly
accountant
with DepEd,
is
aside from the
the
name, the
requirements
signature,
and
the
that they would
date,
have
meron
to
pong
submit
locations.
for the release of the
February
check.
21,
And kasama
or the
rin po
very
dito
next
si
day
Attorney
after
Sanchez.
the
However,
SDO
Attorney
and
Sanchez, I
cash
believe,
made
made
that
that
statement
7.5
that
million in checks.
past that point,
lumabas
and
po
what
sa
we've
acknowledgement
established
receipts
that
that the personalities
SDO Fajardo
involved
made
with
7
the
disbursements
confidential
already.
funds
This
would
is
be
the
the
day
SDO
after.
in
VP
seven different
and yourself.
locations. And the locations
However,
are Malolos,
we take note po,
Davao,
Ms. Lopez,
San
to the Honorable
Francisco,
Chairman,
most
most
respectfully,
respectfully,
na
Makati
binigit po
City,
ninyo that you're
Negros
only
Oriental,
concerned
Negros
with
Occidental,
operations.
and
And by operations, you're talking, I
So the
guess,
very next
about
day
the
after, I would
social
assume,
amelioration
the
program
check was
ng,
issued, it
Office
was
of the Vice
encashed
President.
in
Is
Land
that
Bank
correct,
under
Ms.
the
Lopez?
SHOB branch.
That
Tama
is
po ba
correct,
for
Your
DepEd?
Honor. That is my role
Or the
as
DepEd
Undersecretary
branch. So
and
the
Chief
DepEd
of
branch,
Staff of
that
the
is
Office of the
in
Vice
what city po
President.
here in NCR?
Pasig, sir.
Ms.
In
Lopez, I hope
Pasig
you,
po, in
Attorney
cash.
Lopez, I hope you
And
understand
immediately the
how
next day,
we would
he
be,
traveled to these 7 places
how we would
and find that
97 ARs.
quite confusing because
Did this not
generally
raise a
the
red
idea
flag
of a
of
chief of
the
staff would be
impossibility
second
of
to
this
the head of the
occurring?
agency. And
Um,
by virtue of that,
well, it
everyone
does,
else
sir,
in the
although
department
during
would be
our
under the chief
review,
of staff. Generally, that's how it
somehow,
works. Our understanding is that in the
accepted
OVP,
the,
how many USEC
acknowledgement,
positions are
yes.
there? Maybe
For
ask.
reasons
Uh,
you've
there
already
is-
stated earlier.
There's only
Well,
one
In
undersecretary
addition to this,
position, Your Honor.
and
If
the
you go to the
undersecretary
day
position is that
of the
of
first
chief of
quarter
staff.
that had the
That
most
is correct.
disbursements,
So
which is
generally,
March 15,
including the
2023.
SDO, although they have
SDO
specific
Fajardo
responsibilities
supposedly
under
made
the circular
26
regarding to the
disbursements.
confidential
The following
funds, they are
locations,
still
Davao
under
del
your
Sur,
supervision.
Surigao del Sur,
That's the
Oriental
USEC.
Mindoro, Laguna,
The
Zamboanga del Sur,
SDOs, Your
Cebu,
Honor,
Ifugao,
do not
Antique,
report
Batanes,
to me.
Pampanga,
They don't
Legazpi,
report to
Lanao
you,
del Norte,
although you are the
Batangas,
most
Tarlac,
senior
Metro
official
Manila,
after the
Samar,
Vice
Davao de
President
Oro,
in,
Luzon del Norte, Davao
Your
del Sur,
Honor,
Davao de
if
Oro,
I may
Laguna,
be allowed
Cavite,
to,
Surigao del
Sir
Norte.
Congressman Gutierrez,
Attorney Camora,
if I
let's
may
give
be
him a
allowed
helicopter.
to,
I don't think he'll do that in one day.
Explain my answer. In the
So it
Office of
really
the Vice
raises the
President,
question,
although I
how
am
did
the
SDO
Undersecretary
Fajardo
and the Chief
certify
of
and
Staff,
say that he
I am
personally
purely
disbursed this?
handling,
Buti
as
na
I
lang po yung
mentioned,
DepEd
operational
ARs have
concerns.
location. So it really shows us kung saan po sila.
There are
Unlike
areas,
the DepEd
for
ARs, yung OVP po
There are
wala.
areas, for example,
Yung OVP
that I am
would
not
only have
privy
the
to.
name,
One
the
of
purpose,
which
the name, the signature,
is
and the
the
date.
matter
That's it. And
of
the amount. Pero
confidential
here we can see in DepEd, it
expenses.
seems to be really
But
impossibility.
as
So you can
regards
see
the
theme-
institutionalization
not
of the
really the theme po, but what we're
projects,
driving at here.
implementation of the
Earlier,
projects,
according to Congresswoman Guren, and I
communications
understand her
that come
frustration,
through the
there
office,
is the
internal,
physical
issuances of
impossibility
memo,
of the
issuances of
delivery and encashment of the cash.
special
There are
orders,
questions regarding
etc.
that
They
surrounding
go
where it
through
was
me.
brought. And then now,
And
even the
also,
physical
for external
impossibility of
communications,
the
Your Honor, for
disbursement. Yun
example,
naman
there
po
is a
yung tanong
request
dito.
for
If truly SDO certifies that he
referral
or she
to the, for
is
example,
the only person
the
and
DSWD
yes, personal
or the
knowledge
Department
of
of
disbursement,
Health,
has personal
all
knowledge,
these
has gone
matters,
through the
Your Honor, are
DBPs,
coursed
how do we
to the Office
how do
of
we
the Chief
explain
of
this?
Staff.
It looks like
And all
from north to
communications
south,
emanate
tip to tip
also
po
from the
ng
Office of
Pilipinas.
the Chief
By
of
Batanes
Staff.
pa rin po.
External, especially to those national government agencies.
So these are just some of the
On
questions
top of
that
that,
we
Your
have. And if we
Honor,
look at the
I
chart
handle
earlier,
the
it
day-to-day
happens
operations
multiple
of,
times. For February 25,
there is a
there were 21
clustering
disbursements
in the
across
Office
18
of the
different
Vice
localities.
President. For
February
example,
27,
as
21
I'm-
disbursements
in
across
the case
18
of
localities.
Director
March
Lin,
3,
she
and the list
handles
goes on.
the
And if you notice
finance
the chart, every day
cluster,
po
which
yun.
is budget, accounting,
Every day po may disbursement. So it
GSD,
really
no?
raises
Under
the
you.
question po,
The
no?
procurement.
Yes,
That
Mr.
is
About
her
the legal, the veracity of the certification.
AOR.
We're
On my
now
end,
seeing
Your Honor, I
the
handle the frontline delivery of
consequences
administrative support,
of our
such as
current format
disaster
that we have,
operations
that a simple signature, which the
Disaster
COA
Operations
just
Center,
blindly, not
Legal
to
Affairs
fault you.
Division,
Again, we understand the
and
reasons
also
that
the
you have.
protocol
You lack
team.
manpower and all that.
Those are matters
But napakahirap
that
po to because we're talking
I have
about
direct
the
hand
most
into and
difficult to
information
account for,
I am privy
confidential
to.
intelligence funds po. No?
So yun lang po yung
So,
aking
if I may
areas
continue,
of
Attorney Camora,
concern.
and
And
again, I understand frustration.
there are
We wanted
areas
to ask,
actually
I wanted to ask this to
in the Office of
SDO
the Vice
personally.
President,
I
katulad,
think they
for
would have been able
example,
to
let me just
answer.
cite, if you allow
But
me,
on the light
sir,
side na lang po
the
to make
matter
the most of
of
the
the
information we have, at
appointments
least
or
on the
the
side of the COA,
scheduling
that you'd
of
understand
the
the frustration of this committee. And that you'd
courtesy
understand
calls,
po where we'd
etc.
want to
on
proceed
the
with this.
Vice
It goes the same
President.
with the OVP.
Although it may be
If I
true
may
that
continue, Mr. Chair,
high-ranking
what happened
officials
to
call
OVP
me
is that
and
even
say
if it
na,
doesn't have the
USEC
locality or the
attorney,
address,
confirm mo naman
the,
yung aming
disbursements
appointment
are
with the
really
Vice
dubious
President.
and
This
curious
is something that I
because
have no
it
say,
really makes use of
direct
these
say to, because
disbursements in a
this
way
is
that you would
all
find hard to believe. Just the number of
done by the
disbursements
appointments team.
given in the number
In the
of
same
days,
manner,
it
the
really
protocol
raises some
team of the Vice
questions po.
President,
Like, for
although
example,
all
December
the
23,
members of the diplomatic
December,
corps call me
23rd
as
December
the head of the
2022.
agency, as the
This is
highest,
close as in relation to what the
highest
Congressman
official
Acop mentioned. There were a
and
lot of
as the
holidays
Chief
in
of
those
Staff,
11 days.
it does not
And in fact,
guarantee
Noche
them
Buena would have been
that there
the
will be a scheduled
number one
courtesy
thing
call
that people
because
would be
these are
preparing for.
matters
But on the
that
eve
are
of
determined
Christmas,
purely
the day before,
on
when
that
you'd be preparing
end.
for the eve of
So,
Christmas on
it's,
December 23,
uh,
at least 103
I think
individuals
it's a
received a total amount of
compartmentalized
15
kind
million
of
pesos.
set up, Your Honor, that there
I mean,
are only certain
just
functions
15 million
and
pesos
tasks
for 103
that
individuals.
I am
If truly
privy
the
to,
SDO certifying
in
that
which case
personally
that is the one
she,
that
I
I have
think this is
mentioned
SDO
earlier.
Acosta. She
But
dispersed this. It really
although I
raises the
would wish
question.
to answer
Kung the
really
possibility
respectfully
po, no,
as
of how they
regards
did
the
this.
matter of the confidential
So,
expenses, it is something that
And this would include a bunch of things.
I
so
have
it's very
not
much
really
payment
been
of
privy to
reward,
from the
payment
very
of
beginning.
information, medicine,
So,
the safe houses were also included there.
In the
Given
case of the earlier
various
questions by
clusterings, if you would call it that.
General
Parang
Congressman
it
Ako,
leads
rather,
to the, I would
it
not
is
say
something that I
impossibility,
cannot
the
really
improbability
answer because I
of
am
the
not
AR
privy to
submitted. So I
the
think we really need a
disbursement,
strict scrutiny po, no,
utilization, nor
of the TEPs that
liquidation
are
of
being
the
submitted.
confidential
I'd just like to point out
funds.
that based on this
So,
study,
the days where the
Ganun po
OVP
siya,
gave
Your Honor.
confidential
That is
funds,
how
over 100
it is
recipients,
run in
all
the Office
happened
of
in
the Vice
2022.
President.
And this is the
Thank you
time
for the
that had
clarification, Attorney
11
Lopez.
days. Well, I only
So you
mentioned
could see
that because it was the words
I don't know
of
if it's
Attorney
attention,
pero
just
minadali
attention
po
that
talaga.
you would
There
probably
was really
be
quick
privy
disbursement.
to
And in line with
the,
that, just one last question. I think it would be understandable. It would be an understandable statement on the part of Congressman Sanchez because the general understanding of a chief of staff, he was being the sole using of that agent Sanchez, that would be an understanding that there would be certain that you would have overall supervision. Well, in relation to the SDOs and in line with the circular, we also understand that they have specific responsibilities. And you've only consumed, for example, but we can't help but be puzzled. Does that mean mawawala? And I understand you're telling us now that it's compartmentalized, but still we would think that generally the head of the agency would course things through you, although necessarily separate in the first quarter issue ng disbursement of the SDO. Wouldn't other matters regarding the SDO, for example, administrative or human resources or logistics-wise, are they not coursed through you in relation to the SDO? Or are they limited still to the quarterly limit of 125? If I'm understanding it correctly, the job of the
Mr.
SDO
Chair,
would also entitle a lot of
the cash
travel.
advances
As
for
you've
the whole year,
pointed out
so
earlier,
as
I mean,
long
we've
as
seen that
the,
maraming travel
cash
orders po ang
advances
ating
are within
SDO
the year,
to the point na wala rin po
and
siya
the
today
last,
because
cash
of
advance
official
was
travel po, no?
liquidated, they
So,
could
in
cash
relation to that, there's a lot of
advance again for the
intermingling pa rin.
next,
Although you might say
like
compartmentalized,
quarter,
there are a lot
for
of
the
things that would
next,
go through you.
yes, quarter,
I would
since
understand that
most of
travel
them,
orders are signed by the assistant chief of
quarterly.
staff right now,
So, for
only
example, on the
because you were gone
31st
for
of
the
March,
longest
I've
time.
consumed 100,
But generally,
and I
you would be
justify the
signing off on the
liquidation
travel
report
orders of the
100
SDO. Would that be a fair
I
statement?
still need to justify
Your Honor,
the
I
25
do not sign
left,
off
even beyond
on the
March 31. That would be allowed
travel
for the
orders
first
of
quarter.
certain officials, or in
May-
this case,
can you repeat?
the
Sorry.
SDO.
So, yung first quarter po,
May I
meron
just
tayong cash
confirm
advance of
kung sino lang yung
125
pwede
million.
kong
Ang
pirmahan
nakonsumo lang po ng opisina ay 100 million lamang. May 25 million po na balance. Does that mean I can only, I would
My case,
still,
Your
I can
Honor,
still
in our,
justify the 25 million
the
after
case
March
of the Office of the Vice
No,
President,
Mr.
I can
Chair,
only sign off on the travels
it has
of
been cash
Directors
advanced for
Lynn
that period,
Sanchez and
the
Director
amount
Baloro,
that was
who is the
unutilized
Director
should
for
be returned
Operations.
to-
All the other
should be,
travel
returned by the
authorities, I do not
SDO.
sign off on them.
It should be returned to the SDO.
Yes,
Yung
Mr.
sinasabi po ni
Since yung
Congressman
liquidation
Ako.
po is,
So, Mr. Chair, Attorney
yung
Lopez,
buong
you're
amount
telling
po
us
dapat.
now that
But
even
it
sa
could be
pag-sign ng
obligated
travel
in that
orders,
time.
may
It doesn't have to be
clustering pa po
dispersed. You could
kayo.
obligate for the 25 million.
You are only
Why didn't you
authorized
return? I believe that was the point
to
that Congressman Ako was making.
issue travel orders for these two officials,
Pwede
and then
naman
everyone
po.
else has
As long as it
different
is
parang
still
boss.
within
Ganun po
the
ba yung
year.
sistema sa OVP?
I-
I hope you'd understand the confusion
It's
because we
still
were
within the
presented
year,
before
so
an
yung cash
organization,
advance is
and it
still
all
for
seemed
the
to be like a
year.
pyramid, downstream lahat. Although
Thank
there
you,
are
Attorney
clusters,
Comoro. So yun lang
everything's
po,
under
just
you.
to
But now we're
manifest
seeing
really
that
drives
there
the
are
point
limits
that
to
it
your
seems
responsibility. Are we understanding
There are
this
questions
correctly?
po with the timing
Your Honor,
and the
in
accompanying
our
DEPs, and I'm
in the
sure
Office
that
of the
we're
Vice
still going to go
President,
back
we have
because
a
there were other
certain
questions,
delegation of
but
authority.
unfortunately, wala po
There's
yung
only
ating SDO,
certain
so I'll have to hold on to that. Mr. Chair,
papers
with that,
or
I'd yield
documents
to
that
other
get into the
interpreters.
Office of the
Maraming
Chief of
salamat po.
Staff.
Just an interjection.
And there are also
Yes.
others that go directly to the
Congressman,
Office of Director Sanchez, as well as the
Franz
Office of
Castro.
Director
Yes, so
for Operations.
excellent
Mr.
no,
Chairman,
yung pinakita
Attorney
natin
Lopez, could you please
pag-analyze
guide us through also?
nung
Ano pong ibang
utilization
clusters? I think you mentioned
noong
financial,
confidential
appointment,
funds
protocol,
in 2020
operations, of course, is what you're in
and
charge
even
of.
in 125
What are the
to
other clusters that we,
2022.
so that we have an
The
idea?
possibility,
the
the
in line with that, Attorney
improbability,
Lopez, so what you're saying now is confirming
yung
what Attorney
pagbabayad
Poe
ng
told us
SDO
earlier. That if
nito
you take a
doon
deeper
sa
look into
mga
the OVP,
binanggit natin
napaka-compartmentalized. He
ano,
used the same term
kung ito man
actually.
ay
It's very
reward or
compartmentalized
whatever
OVP.
or
So
reward.
you are affirming that now po.
So ano ngayon ang gagawin ng
you said
Mr.
COA
Chair?
said-
Gagawin ng
The compartmentalized po yung
COA
OVP. Sometimes,
doon, na obvious na
what the left
obvious
hand does,
na sa
the right hand
pag-analyze
doesn't.
natin, even
Parang,
Attorney
what
Camora,
si
nagsasabi
Attorney
siya na
Poe,
parang
while spokesperson,
imposible.
should be
Tama ba
expected
yun?
to know the ins and outs of the office.
In one
Because
day,
precisely as spokesperson,
in
he
one
will be
day,
relaying this information
in
to the public.
different
When we were
in
asking
different
him, he said
places,
compartmentalized po. He doesn't
magagawa
talk
ba
about
ng
confidential
SDO
funds. So you now,
na
as the
pumunta
chief of staff,
para
you are now
bayaran
confirming ng OVP
yung mga
po,
sinasabi natin
despite
na
the
dapat
hierarchy that we
nabayaran
see in the official
in a
organization
day.
chart, napaka-compartmentalized
Sabi nyo kanina
pala
at
po
sabi
yun.
naman sabi natin
yes, that is
kanina no,
correct, Your
imposible.
Honor. I can only speak
So that
for
is
my
yung
experience
ano no
as the
sa
Chief of Staff.
sa
I cannot
pagre-review
really
ninyo
speak
nung
for,
ipinasa ng mga
Attorney
acknowledgement
Poa.
receipt,
Because there are certain
etc.
areas
So Mr.
in
Chair,
the
ang tanong
OVP that
dito,
I cannot
kasi hindi
really-
lang tayo
I have no
matatapos na
information on.
ito na yung nangyari,
Or I
parang
cannot
nakakatawa na
really have a
talaga eh.
direct hand
Ano yung SDO na yon, Mr.
on
Chair?
the-
Lumipad
how
mula sa isang lugar
how it
patungo
all
sa isang
isang
operates.
lugar, in eight
So,
places
Mr. Chair,
lumipad.
the operation
Kung siya
of
lang
the
talaga yung
OVP, rather than
nagdi-disperse.
the usual
So
hierarchy
talagang
where it's a
ano no,
pyramid,
talagang
where you have the large base
parang
with information
pinapatawa
or data
tayo, no?
operations,
Pinapatawa ang
passing
taong
information
bayan ng
upwards
Office of
to
the
select
Vice President
supervisors,
na
upwards
nagagawa
again to
ito.
director level, ASEC,
No? So
USEC,
ano ngayon ang
and
gagawin ng
finally to the
COA?
VP.
Are you
You're
still
telling us
going
now
to
that the
accept
OVP operates in a
those
hub-and-spoke
acknowledgement
type of
receipt
situation
or
wherein
those
the OVP is
na mga
central and then direct na lang po
disbursement
siya
na tingin
to the
natin
different. For example, OVP
ay
direct,
panloloko
direct kay
lang, niloloko na
spokesperson, direct
tayo.
kay chief of staff,
'Di ba?
direct kay Attorney
Niloloko
Sanchez
tayo, taong
for
bayan.
operating different
So ano
clusters.
gagawin po ng
And each
COA,
cluster
Mr. Chair?
doesn't know what the
Gusto
other
kong
is doing.
malaman, are you going to i-review nyo ba ulit? Ibabalik nyo yan? Or kailangan nyo nang magdesisyon ngayon?
I can
Kung,
only answer, Your Honor,
dapat
on my
yan
role
na
as the
yung
Chief of
pondo na
Staff.
ito ay
Sorry,
ibalik
and I'll
yan
just,
sa pondo
add
ng
to that
taong
point.
bayan.
And I understand
So ano
you can
po
only
yung
speak
pwedeng
as the
moving
chief of staff,
forward
because what you're telling
doon
us
sa
now is
ipinisend
that you
po
have
ni
been compartmentalized
Representative
only
Raj
as the chief of staff.
Gutierrez?
So now you're
Mr.
telling me
Chair, anong
what I'm
gagawin ng
trying to
COA
present now,
doon?
and if you would agree with that, is that the
Mr.
VP is
Chair.
very hands-on but treats you separately.
Mr. Chair,
So there's a, like I said, the hub and spoke.
actually,
the VP is in the
we are
center,
thankful
and she
to
deals
the,
directly
yun
with
nga,
Attorney
to
POA
the body
for other
for,
matters which you might not know, then
pointing this
directly
out
with you
to
for
us,
Chief of
since
Staff
for us
operations
naman po
for
as
matters that
auditors,
only you
we-
know, directly
presume
to
this
Attorney
as
Sanchez
yung
for matters that only the
regular,
finance would know, and you don't coordinate with each other.
Ano po. But since
There are
these things have been
there are cases,
pointed
Your Honor,
out,
that is, in
I
my
think we will be
experience, that is
basing
the
our
case.
reviews
For
na
example,
based on
in the case of the
what has,
spokesperson,
what we have discussed here in this hearing. And
it
as to
is
the
not something
cases
that I
po
am
ng
also
sa
privy to.
OVP and DepEd,
the instructions
yung
for
sa
the
2023 especially
OVP
po,
spokesperson.
AOM pa lang
It
po
happens,
yung
Your Honor, that way.
status nung
Thank you. I think
nung
this will be
audit
more, the
actions
compartmentalization of the
namin,
OVP
under
will be more
review pa rin
relevant
po
as we
yung
go on. But I'll
mga
just go back and
compliance
focus on the
nila.
SDOs.
So we
Thank you very
will
much,
take po in
Attorney Lopez.
consideration lahat
So
po
yun
ng
po, we
napag-usapan
had an
natin
idea,
and
although Ms.
be more
Attorney Sanchez
circumspect
mentioned that
in,
3
our
persons
review.
were involved with the SDO.
Although
It seems to
mahirap
be
since
narrowed
yun
down
nga
po
po,
now.
marami pong
It looks to be,
transactions, but
like with the DepEd,
moving
it's 2 people. We have
onwards,
SDO
siguro po,
Gina Acosta and the head of agency, which is the
i-apply
Vice
po namin
President.
lahat ng mga
So,
learnings namin
para
dito
sa kalaman po ng lahat, yung joint circular,
hearings
it
na to.
dictates
Although
there
mahirap po
that the
talaga.
SDO is personally
na
tasked
common
with the
sense, i-apply
disbursement
nyo dyan.
and liquidation of confidential funds.
No?
And the head
Kahit
of
na common
agency
sense,
is personally
attorney,
tasked to oversee.
Camorra,
So
i-apply nyo
what
dyan.
Attorney
No?
Lopez has told us
Talagang
now by
imposible
excusing herself or
na
by
talagang
separating
ito,
herself
maaring
from the
ibinusa,
operations of the
di ba?
confidential fund, it now
O
affirms what is in the
maaring
joint
kung saan na
circular.
napunta.
It is down to these
Kaya
two
imposible
people.
yung nangyari na
And in other words,
sa
yung
isang
SDO
araw
po
pumunta ka
yung
sa ibang
inaatasan ng
iba't ibang
batas natin
probinsya
na humawak,
para mag-disperse.
humawak at siguraduhin mapunta
No?
ang confidential
Imposible
funds
yun.
sa naayon
At
na
gamitin
confidential
naman natin
expenses.
yung, ano,
So
no,
this is
yung
all in
kahit
line with
na-
the circular.
kahit na
So
konsensya
since
or kahit
we
na
have
common
questions
sense
ideally
para
for
dyan
the
po.
SDO, but
At
given that
gusto
Ms. Acosta
natin
is
na,
not
dahil
here,
ito
I'd
ay
like to
under
ask these
review,
questions
sinasabi
to
nyo, hanggang
Attorney
kailan po,
Camora.
Mr. Chair, yung review
Apologies,
nito.
Attorney Camora. All roads lead to the COA, so I'll have to ask you
hindi pa po
in
namin
relation
nasabi,
to the
Mr.
circular.
Chair,
So
since ang
we are
Attorney
affirming po,
Camora,
no?
kasama po dito sa hearing
We affirm po that
madalas. So,
with the
we
joint
will try po
circular,
as
it's usually the
soon as,
SDO.
ano,
It's only the SDO
Okay,
is
so
tasked
Mr.
with
Chair,
the
no,
disbursement of
I
the
hope
confidential funds.
yung COA
Yes, Mr.
would
Chair.
be prudent enough
To,
ano, at saka
put
talagang
more meat
tignan nyo
into this, we'd
talaga
like to
kung
present
paano
po yung certification,
ginagamit ng Office
if
of the Vice
COMSEC,
President
if the Secretariat
at
would be
saka
so
ng
kind as to
DepEd
flash it.
before. Itong
The
confidential
certifications
funds.
for the OVP
Thank
and
you,
the
Mr.
DepEd.
Chair.
Actually, Mr. Chair, yung aking mga katanungan is supposedly directed to the Special Disbursement Officer of the OVP. Because under my understanding, based on the joint memo, this would have been SDO Acosta's responsibility. Because under number 6.3.2, Section B, it is part of the Special Disbursing Officer's responsibility to maintain separate records of all transactions and to retain a certified copy or duplicate copy of the required supporting documents and reports on utilization. However, and my questioning is precisely on this, on the acknowledgement receipts attached as justification, yung documentary evidence presented. However, given that the SDO Acosta is not around, I guess we'll be forced to at least to get this, some of the answers, I'll be forced to ask the
Attorney Camora,
COA. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to direct my Chair, questions respectfully, perhaps
ito po yung
to
certification is
Attorney
sinasabi po
Camora
natin.
from
This is
the
what is
ICFAO,
submitted
if
together
they
with
would be
the
so kind to
liquidation report.
indulge.
Is that,
Just as to
correct?
add context po, no,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Attorney
And this
Camora.
is precisely provided under the joint
We know po
circular.
that the confidential presidential
Yes, Mr.
funds
Chair.
are special
This is the exact
in the sense
language
that
mo.
they
Is this an
respond
annex
to,
to the joint
they
circular, or
pertain
is
to
there
a
a
certain
format that is
purpose only
provided?
allowable under
Yes,
the joint
Mr.
memo
Chair,
circular.
it's
But this does not
Annex B
mean
of
that
the
this is a
joint
blanket,
circular.
a
So
blank
as
check
Annex
po, no?
B,
it's not a blanket authority that it could be spent without justification. Will that be a fair statement po?
Attorney Camora, you're recognized.
Altered in any way
that is
any
correct po,
provisions
Your
under
Chair.
the
Mr.
certification.
Chair.
In line with that, and in line with the requirements of the COA, you would ask actually for liquidation reports. Although it's special in the sense
yes,
that it is directed only to the chairman of the COA, you still have the ICFAO to study this. And in fact, it is the ICFAO who gives the AOMs the notice of disallowance and the notice of credit in relation to confidential fund spending. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
That is
It
correct,
says here,
Mr.
quote
Chair.
unquote, incurred by the Mr. Chair, given the, maybe no, I have a timeline again of the 2022 confidential fund usage of the OPT. If I understand correctly, it was dispersed within 11 days. This was for December of 2022, and the basis of the funds was a transfer from the contingent fund. But
Yes, Mr.
there was an
Chair.
AOM issued by your office. Anong date po nito?
Salaries, wages, overtime, additional compensation, allowance, or other fringe benefits of officials and employees.
Yes, Mr. Chair,
third,
the first
that the
AOM is
expenditures are necessary
dated
and utilized
September
for legal
14,
purposes.
2023. Yes, Mr. Chair.
So
So
for the
this means that the
2022
SDO
confidential
should
funds,
personally
September
know
2023,
the
yung
disbursements and the
AOM.
expenses
And the
incurred,
response
and that he would-
by
he should
the
have personal
Office of the
knowledge
Vice
of all of
President
this.
was
That is
received
basically what the
around what
certification
time po
is
kaya?
saying.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And this hand-in-hand with
It
the
was
liquidation
received by
reports
the
would
ICFAO
affirm
on
again
October
the responsibility of the
19,
SDO to
2023, Mr.
disperse the
Chair.
October
confidential fund
2023.
in accordance with the
And
provisions of the
one of the findings there
Yes,
was
Mr. Chair.
insufficient
Since
the
the SDO
DEPs
handles
po,
the
no?
fund personally,
And
it
this would be
necessarily
pertaining to
follows
in
that
support of
he
the
gives the
liquidation
money.
reports, yung
That's right.
ating
And I believe you
mga
answered this
acknowledgement
with,
receipts. Because
Congressman
compared to
Belated.
usual spending by government wherein we
mentioned
actually need
that
official
there could be
receipts,
possibly multiple
kapag
SDOs.
ang pinag-uusapan po ay confidential
designate
or
many
intelligence funds
From all
because
of our
precisely
agencies po and departments, GOCC,
confidential
Secretary,
dapat
CIF,
yung
or
usage
IM.
nito.
How many
It
po
is
would have
sufficient to
only one
submit
SDO?
acknowledgement receipts. Tama po ba?
Actually, Mr. Chair, since the requirement is documentary evidence of payment, not necessarily official receipt. Fewer.
Correct.
So,
Okay, so mostly have one
they could
SDO.
submit
Yes, Mr.
acknowledgement
Attorney Camora,
In that case,
pwede pong
that
pakilakasan
SDO
po
is
ninyo
the
yung
one in
boses
charge
ninyo.
for and paying, and it cannot be delegated further.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, for example, if you have an
Documentary
informer,
evidence
which is
of
basically
payment
what the
po
CIF
ang
is for,
required
you have an
sa
informer who needs to be
joint
paid,
circular.
it is the
So,
SDO who personally pays this to them.
the acknowledgement
that is
receipts
the
are
presumption.
acceptable po.
That is the
based on
presumption.
the
Correct po, no? And I agree with that. So the acknowledgement receipts
And
are
based on the
acceptable.
requirements
However,
of the
one of the
circular, it
findings of
cannot
the
be
AOM
delegated.
was
So the
kulang nga po
presumption
yung
should be reality.
DEPs. And this is pertaining
yes,
to
Mr.
the
And that is the
acknowledgement
understanding of the
receipts.
COA.
Yes,
That it is
Mr.
them
The
who
first
personally
time
handles it.
na
And it is them who
nag-liquidate po sila,
personally
wala po
receives the
talagang
acknowledgement.
submitted na DEPs,
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
So the SDO
So that's
cannot
why you
give
had
to
the
another
AOMs
employee,
in
for
September
example, up to
2023. Part of
125
the
million,
findings was the
specific,
lack of
for
the
example,
DEPs, precisely yung mga ARs natin.
clustering. So
And
ikaw
then
sa
they
rewards
answered in
of
October
medicine,
2023.
ito,
When they
20
filed in
million.
October
And then siya
2023,
na po
was
yung
it
in
already
charge,
there, yung
and then
DEPs?
whatever ARs
Yung
that delegated
justification
first
pa nila?
would pass it on to the SDO.
Yes,
That is
Mr.
not
Chair,
allowed
it was
under the
part of
circular.
their compliance.
So it was submitted October 2023. After that, there was a notice of disallowance pertaining to that quarter. Kailan po ito na-issue?
Mr. Chair, before that, a notice of suspension was issued. So,
Yes. So, basically, command
normally,
response siya pa rin.
after
But if that were the
the
case, that is
AOM
not in
is
line with the
issued
circular,
and
because it should be
the
personally
COA is not
dispersed
satisfied
by the
with the
SDO.
compliance, we issue
So,
a notice of suspension,
We can't be too sure that the
which was
SDO,
issued on December
if it were the
13,
case that it were
2023.
delegated, the SDO would
December
not be able to
2023.
certify
And the
such
notice of
a
suspension you mentioned is when
supposedly it's
the
saying
COA
that
is not
he's the one
satisfied.
who
So
has
yung
to
pagsubmit po ng October
Yes, Mr.
2023
And this is the same for
DEPs,
payments
hindi
of
pa po
rewards.
satisfied yung
This is
COA.
not
And
just
what was the
for
reason that you were not
handling funds in
satisfied?
general.
Mali-mali po
Even
ba
for
yung mga
financial rewards
AR
and
or
information, it
what
goes the
kulang
same
pa
way.
po yung mga
Yes,
AR?
Mr. Chair.
The SDO gives
May
payment
mga
directly to the
may mga
recipient,
ibang
and the recipient
ARs
is
po na
supposed to
may
give the AR
issues
or
and
any
may
DEPs
kulang
that
pa
are
po na additional documentation on other
Ms.
ARs.
Camora, Attorney Camora, so these
And
acknowledgement
when
receipts
after the
submitted
notice of
by the
suspension
OVP
for
and the
December
DepEd,
2023, they were
this
given
is
another
proof,
chance to
this is
submit
the
additional
documentary
documents. Is
evidence
that
of
correct or
payment
wala
that
na
is
po?
required by the
Meron
circular.
pa, Mr.
And
Chair.
now we have that understanding that you
they were
confirmed now that the
given 90
SDO
days.
personally handles the
90
same.
days.
To
When did they
handle the funds and they
apologies?
handle
When did they
the-
submit their additional DEPs po
Yes, Mr. Chair.
in response to the notice of
So-
suspension?
Mr. Chair,
If
we,
there's
we
any doubt
received
to
their
the confidential
compliance
funds,
on
if there's any
March
doubt at all to the
13,
DPPs, any doubts to
2024.
the ARs, which have
March
been
2024.
hammered down in the last
And
hearing,
finally,
now
I
this hearing,
suppose
all
after
points
this,
down to the
ito na po
SDO.
yung
This is their
disallowance.
personal
Yes, Mr.
responsibility.
Chair.
Anong date po ng disallowance po natin?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The disallowance is
So,
dated
for
August
example,
8,
one of the things that we
2024,
pointed out
Mr.
last
Chair.
time,
August
in relation to the
2024. Thank you.
dates. If
I'll
there's
get
any
back to that po.
problem
No?
with
I
the
wanted
date
to
of
establish
the
a timeline
AR,
because
it would
one of
be-
the
it
things
should
that we
pass
have
to the
found
SDO.
with the acknowledgement
Yes,
receipts
Mr.
is that there seems
Because
to be
unlike, for
a
example,
disconnect
in
in
the usual
regarding
what happened in
relation to
let's
the
say, in a
dates,
usual transaction,
especially
pumunta ka sa
considering
mall, bumili ka
the
ng,
fourth quarter
kain,
of
magbibigay ng
2022
resibo. You wouldn't
CF.
pay a second
Mr. Chair,
thought
maybe
of
ask the
OR,
Secretariat. I
because
don't know if
usually
they
you have to
prepared it.
liquidate
I want to
any
flash on
piece of
screen an
paper.
acknowledgement
But
receipt.
as an SDO in which you have a
Here.
personal responsibility, nakataya pera mo pa rin kasi
can you-
nakaband ka po.
Is the date
to the Treasury.
legible po sa inyo?
So you would have to check
GC?
and make sure that
I'd
all
like
of
to
the
confirm
ARs
that
are
the date
accurate.
that it says is
Yes, Mr.
actually
Chair.
December
Including the date.
28,
Yes, Mr. Chair. Since
2023.
one of the
Do you,
responsibilities
do you
under
see
the
that,
Joint Circular
Attorney
is
Kamora?
to disperse
yes,
the
Mr.
CF
Chair.
and IF in accordance with
And
the provisions
supposedly
of
this was attached.
So if the circular
I'm not
requires
sure
an
if this would come in
acknowledgement
for the
receipt,
first
an
batch of
acknowledgement
response in
receipt
December
required the date. So the date having been
or if it
filled
came
in
in
for
with
the AR
the
received by
second
the
batch of
SDO,
response
the
from March
SDO has the
2024.
responsibility to make sure that
But
it is
this is supposedly a
Yes,
DEP
Mr. Chair,
presented
although
for
the
the
requirement
fourth
is
quarter of
documentary
2022.
documentary evidence. So,
Isn't
I'm
it
sorry,
strange?
but yes, the AR as the
Not really
DEP
strange. It's
would be
outright
required
false
to have
for
gone
it
under
to
scrutiny of the
justify
SDO.
an
So
expense in
if we had
2022, but the date is
158
2023.
ARs,
Would
which
that be
have
correct,
a
Ms. Kamora? Attorney
supposed
Kamora?
typographical error.
That is correct, Mr.
Shouldn't the
Chair.
SDO have caught
Actually,
on,
one of the
since
findings
they personally gave the
under
money
the notice
and
of
received the
suspension
receipt? He
is
would
that
check the receipt.
some of the
Kung
acknowledgement
tama yung pangalan, may
receipts
signature,
were dated
tama
December
yung purpose and the
2023.
date.
And
So
some
the
were
158
even
times
undated.
na mali yung date,
Yes. And this would be the
supposedly
basis for
158
disallowance.
times na dumaan po ito.
Or
sa SDO.
was this,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
ano po yung, this was the findings
So
of the
with that,
AOM po, no?
we'd like to ask
Yes,
Vico. I know we've
that
asked
is
this before
under
already,
the
but,
notice
we're
of
looking
suspension
into
na po,
responsibility
Mr. Chair.
of COA. You've
Since
already
na-
mentioned many times that the ICFA would
Na,
only be
nakapag-comply na
concerned with
sila. So,
submission
yung
of the
observation
deeds,
namin
and
was
that you wouldn't look no further
already
because
under
generally
the
parang
notice of
ministerial na
suspension
lang to a
po.
point. But shouldn't
How would
have
it be
raised some
complied
red
po,
flags
Attorney
po?
Kamora? How did they
Especially now in
rectify
hindsight, may
the
158
AR? If it,
typographical errors
I mean, my understanding po is pag
Well,
submitted po yung AR, this is already supposedly presumed to be regular, and then you have an outright problem such as 2023. Although you might say na typographical error, but correct me if I'm wrong, this happens more than once po. Is that correct? Attorney Kamora?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Would you know how many ARs
We
exactly
understand po, no, you
yung
mentioned
dated
before that one of the
2023
limitations of
submitted
your
for
office's
2022?
manpower. And I think
Yes,
one
Mr.
thing that the
Chair.
committee will be working on in aid of legislation is to
Mr. Chair, we have
strengthen po the
attached
COA
in
that
the,
you would
it
have the
in the
proper manpower
original
support to make sure that
notice
this
of
does not happen
suspension.
again.
However,
I think that's
we
one
do
thing
not have
personally this
the
representation
figures
would like to
today.
push forward for the
Sige
consideration.
po. Well, just to help you po,
With that
no,
said,
based on
so
our study,
I hope that the ICFA would take into
158
special
of the
consideration
acknowledged
not only
receipts
the
have that typographical error.
possibility of typographical
We would understand the
errors,
typographical
the
error if it
frequency
happens
of it
once or
occurring,
twice,
the time span
and
in
that
which it
most
happens. And of course now, as
for
mentioned
one
by
individual to
Congressman
make that
Adjong,
mistake
we've
multiple
seen earlier
times.
that
But
there are
for
problems even
supposedly
with,
acknowledgement
multiple
receipts
names
which
with
come from
different
different
signatures.
sources,
This
this
should
should be
have raised the red
different
flag. And of
people
course,
issuing
the
it po, diba?
bogus names that were
These are
raised
different
by
people
Congressman
signing
Acop,
off for
such as
different
Mayor
expenses.
Piattos.
Now, for
So these are things that I hope that the ICFA would
158
be
people
more
to make the
stringent
same
with. But there's
mistake,
one more matter
is that
aside from that
something
issue which we
that
have
would
brought up at the
be
previous hearing that I
acceptable?
hope
Is that
you
an
can
acceptable
consider.
margin of error for the
Upon
COA?
studying po yung DEPs natin,
Mr.
and
Chair,
we already know that
they,
there's a question about the time span in which
they answered
alam
in
natin
their
questionable
compliance.
yung 11 days
As
na
to
5 days pa nga po ay
the,
holiday. dispersed
Mr.
po
Chair,
lahat.
apologies. Maybe
But one more thing
what
we
does it
consider,
mean to
now that
answer
you
with the
have affirmed to
compliance?
us,
So
now that we understand it better, na
they
yung
took
SDO
back yung AR
is
na mali po
personally
yung
in charge
date
of
or
dispersing the funds.
No, Mr. Chair, yung
We
compliance
collated po
nila
yung ating mga DPs, and we've
contained
seen
their
po, for
answers
example,
why
for this
they
is, I
had
think, the DepEd. So
the
this would be by
acknowledgement
Mr.
receipts
Fajardo.
dated December
For
2023 and
I believe this is
undated
the first quarter of
acknowledgement
2023.
receipts.
And what was the answer
Submitted
po,
on the
Attorney
31st of
Camora?
March.
They
There were disbursements
said they
every
have
day po, no, since the
inadvertently
release of the
contained clerical or
And that disbursements, they would
typographical
not go less than
errors
10
indicating
times a day po.
2023 instead of
If you could see po in the chart,
2022.
this is what we've
Considering the
seen. You
nature
would
of
notice that
confidential
the ARs,
activities which are
it would
usually
say the address or
conducted
location.
discreetly
This is one thing
and
particularly with
completed
DepEd.
within a
Aside
short
from the
period
name,
of
the
time, and in
signature, the date,
addition to
meron
the
pong
lack of
location.
attention to details of
So,
personnel
on February
attending
21,
to voluminous
2023, or the
papers from
very next
several
day after the
individuals,
SDO and cash
some data in
the
the acknowledgement
37.5
receipts
million
submitted
checks.
as proof of
Lumabas po sa
transactions may
acknowledgement
have
receipts
been
that
missed.
SDO Fajardo made 7
Mr. Chair,
disbursements already. This is the day
apologies.
after.
I think that
In 7
portion would
different
suffice po,
locations.
Attorney
The locations
Comorano.
are
So the
Malolos,
answer of
Davao,
compliance, they
San
did not
Francisco, Agusan
dispute, they
del
did not
Sur,
take back the
Makati
ARs,
City,
but they
Negros
simply gave that
Oriental, Negros
defense
Occidental,
that
and Davao City.
it was an inadvertent.
So the very next
typo
day,
nga po
I would
siya.
assume,
But
the
precisely
check
the
was
point,
issued,
Mr. Chair,
it
that I
was
think that the
encashed in
committee
Land
should
Bank
consider
under the
is that it's a
sub
typographical
branch
error
of
for
Upper Deped.
158
Or
acknowledgement receipts.
the Deped branch.
This
So
is
the
not
Deped branch, that is in
something
what
that
city
I
po here in
think,
NCR?
although we do not
Pasig.
argue with the COA, of
Pasig
course,
po na
this is
in
their
Tash.
jurisdiction.
And immediately the
It
next
is
day, he
precisely
traveled
their
to these
decision
7
if that
places
compliance
with
would be
every 7
sufficient.
ARs.
However, I
Did
think
this
for
not
us to
raise a red
consider in
flag of the
strengthening the laws that we are going to
impossibility of
craft,
this occurring?
in supports perhaps in support perhaps of the
well,
joint
that's, sir,
memorandum
although
circular.
during
I
our
think we have to be
review,
stricter with the acknowledged
somehow,
receipts to be issued. Because, Mr. Chair, I think I would like to
just
propose
accepted
one thing.
the,
Of course, the COA will not be able to answer this.
For reasons
But given
you've
the
already stated
timeline
earlier,
po, no?
Bongbong.
September
In addition to
2023
this,
yung first na
if you go
AOM.
to the day
The October
of the first quarter that
2023
had
was
the
the
most
compliance
disbursements, which is March
with the
15,
first
2023.
batch of ARs. And then December 2023, the notice of suspension.
In the following
And that was the
locations,
time
Davao del
siguro
Sur,
po, no,
Surigao
that
del
they
Sur,
were
Oriental Mindoro,
coming up with these
Laguna,
new
Zamboanga del
ARs.
Sur, Cebu, Ifugao,
It would make more
Antique,
sense,
Batanes,
Mr. Chair, for them to
Pampanga,
make that
Legazpi,
mistake.
Lanao
Because
del
when you,
Norte,
pag
Batangas,
nagkaka-typographical
Tarlac,
error po natin sa
Metro
date,
Manila,
the usual
Samar,
mistake
Davao
is
de
you
Oro,
put on the
Luzon
date
del
that
Norte,
is
Davao del
current.
Sur, Davao de Oro, Laguna,
Isn't it
Cavite,
possible, Mr. Chair,
Surigao
based
del
on
Norte.
human experience,
Attorney
isn't it
Camora,
more
let's give
likely
him a
that these
helicopter. I don't
ARs
think
were
he'll do that in
prepared
one
a
day.
year after the fact already? That they were prepared in
So it
December
really raises the
2023
question,
because this
how did SDO
precisely
Fajardo certify
coincides
and
with the
say that
date
the person
in
who
which they
disbursed-
submitted the second batch of the
Buti na lang
ARs.
po yung DepEd ARs
I don't
have
think, Mr. Chair,
location.
this was a
It really
mistake
shows
that
us
was
na
committed
something.
in
Unlike
December
the DepEd
2022.
ARs, yung
This was a
OVP
mistake that
po
was
wala.
committed after the
Yung
fact,
OVP
after the
would only
AOM and
have
after the notice of
the name,
suspension,
the
when they were
purpose, the name,
rushing
the signature,
to
the
comply
dates,
with
the amount.
yung mga butas po na lahat ng
Pero
COA.
here we could see in
I think
DepEd,
this is
it seems
something
to
that
be
the committee
really
should consider.
impossibility. So you could see the
Especially when it
not
comes to the
really
compliance with
thief
the
one,
COA.
but
We
what
are
we're
not
driving at
faulting
here.
the COA, of
Earlier,
course, and we
sorry,
respect them.
before
This is their
we get in, and I
jurisdiction.
understand
But
the frustration.
one thing that we
There is
understand
the
that we see from
physical
the COA is that
impossibility
generally
of the
they are
delivery
not
and
really
encashment.
ministerial, but they never,
Questions
they would
regarding that, surrounding where it was brought.
err on the
Then
side
now
of caution
even the
rather than
physical
put themselves in the place
impossibility
to,
of the disbursement.
exercise
Yun naman po yung
discretion
tanong dito.
regarding
If
the
truly
disbursements
SDO
by any
certifies
agency.
that
Sa kanila
he or
po,
she
as long as
is the
complied
only
yung
person
DEP,
yes,
and as long as
personal
there's an
knowledge of
explanation, they would accept it.
personal
However, I
knowledge
think
gone
the
through the
COA has to go
How do we
above and
explain
beyond
this?
that
It looks
requirement.
like from
Because,
north
Mr.
to
Chair,
south,
just to highlight
punta
also
ng
how
Pilipinas. May Batanes pa rin po.
how spurious this seems and how bogus. If December 2022 po yung date dapat na ng AR, tapos December 2023 yung date, it wouldn't even correspond to any confidential funds. It's not possible if ever the reasoning was nagkapalitan ng AR. Because I understand it might be that might be one of the excuses for inadvertence. Baka nagkapalitan yung AR for December 2023 and December 2022. Pero wala pong December 2023. If we recall, the fourth quarter of the confidential funds for the Office of the OVP was never dispersed. They chose, although it was already included in the our General Appropriations Act, they chose not to disperse yung fourth quarter. So saan po na ilalagay itong December 2023 AR if in fact they would say inadvertence nagkapalitan yan? Or if they say typographical error naman, it wouldn't make sense. What's that doing in December 2022? 158 times po nangyari.
I think they would have been
More likely, this was the same mistake committed by perhaps a few persons, which raises the question, are these acknowledgement receipts spurious? Are they bogus? Are they false? In addition to that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to present another acknowledgement receipt. If the Secretariat could please flash yung November one.
Kung Rods, ito ko lang linawin, 158 times na ang date ay 2023.
Mr. Chair, based on what our office has found, 158 of the ARs corresponding to 23.8 million were submitted for the December, for the fourth quarter of 2022 disbursement. But they were citing 2023. Ang sabi nga po ng COA na ang citing the answer of the OVP is that inadvertence po.
Ang dami naman pagkakamali nun.
Number one thing that people would be preparing for. But
Kung
on the eve of
magkakamali ka,
Christmas,
dapat isa lang.
the day before, when you
Eh sa 2023, last quarter, wala na silang confidential funds. So parang lumalabas, lumagpas yung kanilang liquidation. Sobra-sobra yung liquidation na nilabas nila. Tama po ba yung pagkakaintindi ko sa sinasabi ninyo?
Well, Mr. Chair, your guess is the same as ours, but it could also be na these are ARs belatedly prepared.
Kung the possibility po, no, how they did
Okay.
this.
Sige po. Thank you po. Please
Well,
proceed.
this would include a bunch
Thank you,
of
Mr.
things,
Chair.
no? It's very much.
So,
payment
proceeding
of
onward,
reward,
maybe ask
payment
the
of information,
Secretary to Flash,
medicine,
November
safe houses were also
2020,
included there. Even
November
the
17,
various
2023 AR.
clusterings,
Yun.
you would call it
Thank
that.
you.
Parang
Attorney Camora,
It leads to
can you,
the,
is it legible po? Can you
I
see
would
that the
not
date
say
is November?
impossibility, the improbability
November
of
27,
the
sorry,
ARs.
2022.
So I think we really need a strict scrutiny
The
po, no,
2022.
of the DEPs that are being
November,
submitted.
I cannot see it.
I'd just like to point out that based on this
November
study,
17?
the days
November
when the OVP
27
gave
po,
confidential
2020.
funds to over
27.
100 recipients all happened in 2022. And this is the time
Well,
that
Attorney
has
Camora,
been 11
apologies,
days
perhaps di
period.
lang
So you
kita
can see
masyado
na,
sa screen, but on
I don't
paper
know if
nakita po
intentional,
na
pero
November
minatali po
27,
talaga. There was really
2022
quick
po siya.
disbursement. And in line with that, just one last
If
question,
my
Attorney
understanding is
Camora,
correct,
and,
the
which was brought up by,
AR should
Congressman Ako.
correspond to the period
He was
of
driving
the
point
confidential
with,
funds
Attorney
actually
Sanchez
dispersed and
that,
used.
you
Tama po
could
ba?
obligate,
So although it is for the fourth quarter of
If you don't
2022, this was
consume,
submitted as
for
an AR
example,
there,
because this is
it
cash
should
advances,
correspond to
you
the 11
advanced
days of
125
disbursement
for
po that
December
they
of
actually had it. Because if I
And you
understand
only
correctly,
consume, for
anong date
example,
nga po yung
100
first
Does that mean
yung pag-issue
mawawala na po
nung
yung 25
check
million?
for
Or does it carry on
the
to the next
OVP
quarter?
confidential funds?
Sorry, let's not do 2022 kasi last month na yun. Let's say for yung provided na CIF. If in the first quarter of 125
December
million, na consumed ng
20,
po is
2022,
or what's
Mr.
justified
Chair.
is 100
December
million.
20,
What is
2022.
the effect
So
for the second
definitely,
quarter? Can they
this is after November
disperse
27,
150
2022.
million? Or are they limited still to the
Would the
quarterly
COA
limit
have, of
100
course, I would not fault
Mr.
COA for
Chair,
this. This is supposedly a
the
question
cash
for
advances for the
the
whole
special
year, so
dispersing officer,
long as the,
si
cash
SDO
advances
Acosta,
are
but
within
given
the
that
year,
she's not here,
and
I
the
am
last,
constrained to ask the COA,
cash advance was
para saan po kaya
They
would
could
this
cash
be considered?
advance
Because if we also consider, baka sabihin naman natin na typographical error,
next-
baka dapat
yes,
November
quarter,
2023
since
po ito.
most of them
Wala
are
rin pong fourth quarter confidential funds ang
quarterly.
OVP for
So
2023,
for example,
tama
on the
po ba?
31st of March, I've consumed
tama
100
po, Mr.
and I
Chair.
justify with the
So in
liquidation
that
report
case,
100 million.
how would the COA
I
appreciate
still need to justify the 25
this
left,
acknowledgement
even beyond March 31.
Normally,
That
Mr.
would be
Chair,
allowed for the first quarter.
it should be noted that
Can you repeat?
Sorry. So yung first
confidential
quarter po,
funds
meron tayong
should
cash
not be
advance of
used as
125
payment
million. Ang
for
nakonsumo lang po ng
reimbursement of
opisina ay
previous
100 million
activities.
lamang.
So,
May 25 million po
it
na
would have been
balance. Does that
flagged
mean I can
as
only, I can still
reimbursement
justify the 25
expense,
million
so not
after March
allowed.
31?
So
no, Mr.
this
Chair,
would have been
the-
disallowed totally.
it has
And
been
perhaps
cash
there's a good
advance
chance
for
that this is
that
part
period.
of the disallowance
And the
actually of
amount
your.
that was unutilized should be returned.
But I think, Mr. Chair, what is striking
Should
for
be,
this committee
returned
is,
by the
of
SDO.
course, the COA has already
That should
acted
be
on the
returned to the
disallowance.
SDO.
But what
Yung
should be
sinasabi
considered
po ni
Since yung
Congressman
is
Ako,
the,
is, yung buong
the
amount
fact
of
that
the fund.
this
But
could
it
not
could
have
be
happened. I
obligated
mean,
in that time.
reimbursement
It doesn't have
might
to
be
be
one
obligated
explanation,
for the
but how could you
25 million.
reimburse something that this was even the
Hindi
first
naman return. I
batch
believe that was the
of
point
confidential
Congressman Ako was
funds?
making.
December
Ah,
21 po ba?
pwede
Tama
naman
ba?
po yan.
December
As long as
21?
it is December 20, Mr. Chair, yung
December-
date ng check.
December 20 po yung check.
It's
This is
still
the
within the
first
year, so
confidential
yung
funds
cash
ever
advance
issued to the
is
OVP
still
for this
for the year.
administration. Yet they have acknowledged receipts
you,
for
Attorney
November
Camara. So yun lang po,
27,
just to manifest, it really drives the
2022.
point that
Ibig sabihin po, wala pa pong confidential
Your
funds.
questions
They're
po
already
with the timing
coming up
and
with
the
their
accompanying
acknowledgement
EPs,
receipts.
and I'm sure that we're
Mr.
still
Chair,
go back
with
to
the
your
indulgence
other
of Congressman
questions.
Rodriguez,
But
may I just...
unfortunately,
Congressman
wala
Abante.
tayong
Bago ko
SDO,
makalimutan
so
to, no?
Mr. Chair, with that,
Nakalagay
I'd,
dito,
yield
yung
to
pakianong
Honorable
audit
Congressman
yung ano,
Ako.
yung
just an interjection,
acknowledgement
Mr.
receipt
Chair.
yan.
Congressman
Ito po ba ay allowed
Franz
ng COA?
Castro.
Yes, so
Pag gumamit ka nung
excellent no, yung pinakita natin
150,000
pag-analyze nung
na
utilization
reward.
noong confidential funds
pakiano
in
nga,
2023 and even in
acknowledgement receipt,
125 in
pakilagay nga ulit.
2022. The possibility, the improbability, physically,
Allowed po ba ng COA yan?
yung pagbabayad ng
Yung
SDO,
payment of rewards nakalagay
ito,
medicines?
doon sa mga
Allowed po ba ng
binanggit
COA?
natin ano, na
Mr. Chair,
kung ito man ay reward
that is
or
one of
whatever,
the
or reward.
observations po.
So ano ngayon ang
So,
gagawin
therefore,
ng
kung
Mr.
yan ang
Chair?
observation
Gagawin
nyo,
ng,
dinisallow nyo?
COA
Yes,
doon,
Mr. Chair.
na obvious
Okay,
na
so,
obvious.
that
Disallowed.
was
Nasa pag-analyze
actually
natin, even
150,000
Attorney
used
Camora,
for payment of
nagsasabi
rewards
siya
for
na
medicines
parang imposible.
was disallowed
Tama ba
by
yun?
COA.
In one
po ba?
date, in one day,
It is one of the
in
disallowed
different
accounts, Mr.
places,
Chair, yung payment
magagawa
of
ba
reward
ng STO
Ito, disallowed to, di ba?
na pumunta
probably, sir, since
para
kasama
bayaran
naman siya
sa
sa-
mga sinasabi natin
Attorney,
na
but
dapat na bayaran?
probably.
In a day.
Yes, sir. Since it is an
Sabi mo
acknowledgement
kanina, at
basis.
sabi
Diba?
naman, sabi natin
you're
kanina,
a
no,
good lawyer.
imposible.
You cannot just
So
say
that
probably.
is
You
yung
have to be sure about it.
sa
Diba?
pag-review ninyo,
So,
nung
di talagang
pipinasa
disallowed
na
to,
mga
diba?
acknowledgement
Yes,
receipt,
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yan.
etc.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, ang tanong dito, kasi
Please
hindi lang
continue,
tayo
Congressman Roach.
matatapos na
Thank
Ito
you,
na
Mr.
yung
Chair.
nangyari.
Thank you,
Parang nakakatawa na talaga
Basically,
eh.
what we're
Ano
trying
yung
to say here
SDO
po
na yun,
in
Mr.
relation
Chair?
to the
Lumipad
dates, whether
mula
this
sa
is
isang
for
lugar patungo sa
reimbursement
isang
of,
lugar
although illegal po,
in
no?
eight
It's not supposed to
places,
be allowed.
lumipad.
Whether this was
Kung
a
siya lang talaga yung
justification for
nagdi-disperse.
reimbursement or
So
this was
talagang, ano, no,
inadvertence or
talagang,
typographical errors despite being repeated
parang
over 158
pinapatawa tayo, no?
times. These are
Pinapatawa
clear
ang
red
taong
flags po
bayan
in
ng Office
relation
of the
to the
Vice
AR
President
submitted by the office.
na nagagawa
This is something
ito.
that we should consider.
No?
Looking
So ano
forward,
ngayon ang gagawin
we
ng
should
COA?
consider po
Are you
this
still going
in
to
aid of
accept
legislation, perhaps
those
legislation to
acknowledgement
strengthen this
receipt or
joint
those
circular
na
to make
mga
sure that this doesn't appear again, or perhaps
disbursement na tingin
stringent
natin
penalties for when this is caught.
ay panloloko
But more
na,
important than
niloloko na
that,
tayo.
we still have to hold them
Diba?
accountable po. No?
Niloloko tayo,
For
taong
this-
bayan.
although this is
So,
already
anong
passed,
gagawin po
although
ng
there's already
COA, Mr.
notice
Chair?
of disallowance,
Gusto kong malaman, are you
accountability
going
should
to
be had for this.
i-review
Now, in
nyo ba
addition
ulit?
po, moving forward
Ibabalik
from
niyo
these
yan?
erroneous dates
Or
or
kailangan nyo
inadvertent
nang
dates,
magdesisyon
I
ngayon
have another, I would
kung,
like to present another documentary evidence.
dapat yan na
May we have po
yung pondo
the
na ito
Secretariat
ay
Flash,
ibalik
yung
yan sa pondo ng taong
acknowledgement
bayan.
receipt for
So, ano po
Mr. or
yung
Miss
pwedeng
NP.
moving forward doon sa ipinisend po ni
Attorney Camora,
Representative Raj
when we're talking of
Gutierrez.
acknowledgement receipts,
Mr.
basically
Chair,
it's,
anong gagawin ng COA
it's
doon?
something like this one. It's very bare. It just has the amount received for what
Mr.
purpose,
Chair,
and you have the name and the date. That's all that is required.
Actually,
However, when it comes
we
to
are
the name,
thankful
is
to
this
the,
usually the name of the
the
person or
body
signature or
for,
both?
pointing this out to us since for us naman po as
They
auditors
they would give us
we presume
normally
this
yung
as yung
name and
regular-
signature, but actually the signature is
regular
which is
ano po.
more
But
important
since
to the COA.
these things have been pointed
Since
out,
we know that
I think we
unsigned
will be
documents
basing
are
our
really not,
reviews na based on
good documents.
what has
So,
what we have discussed here
kung
in this
signature lang,
hearing.
okay lang
And
po
as to
siya,
the
pero
cases
kung name
po
lang
ng
po, we
sa
will
OVP and
flag it as
DepEd,
unsigned document
yung sa
po.
2023
And what is the
especially
reasoning
po,
for this? Because a
AOM
name
pa lang
can
po
be
yung
written by
status
anyone,
nung,
but a signature is supposedly
nung
unique.
audit
Is that a
actions
fair
namin.
statement?
And under
Yes,
review
Mr.
pa rin
Chair.
po yung
So what
mga
happens when,
compliance
for
nila.
example,
So we will
here,
take
it
po in
may not be seen, it's
consideration lahat po
redacted
ng
precisely
napag-usapan
because it's
natin and
confidential.
be more
However, it could be noted
circumspect
that
in,
this name was written in
our
block
review.
letters, which
Although
are not
mahirap
distinctive
sisihin
by
habang
any
marami pong
manner.
transactions,
Yet,
but moving
this was what
onward,
was submitted as an
siguro po,
acknowledgement report, acknowledgement receipt.
yun.
So in cases such as
i-apply po
this, it's
namin
very
lahat ng mga
possible that
nandito
someone
sa
purporting to be Mr. NP
hearings na to.
is writing the
Although
name for
mahirap po
NP.
talaga.
Would that
Kahit na
be
common
correct,
sense, i-apply niyo
Attorney
dyan.
Camora?
That is correct,
No?
Mr.
Kahit
Chair.
na common
So in
sense,
this case, this would be
Attorney
another case of an
Camora,
irregular
i-apply niyo
AR.
dyan.
Would that be
You know?
correct?
Talagang imposible
Yes, Mr.
na
Chair.
talagang ito
And of
maaring
course, when it
idinunsa,
comes to the
diba?
ARs that are just block
O
letters
maaring
and names,
kung
because
saan na
precisely it
napunta.
could be
Kaya imposible
purporting
yung
to be that
nangyari
person,
na sa
but
isang
signed by
araw,
anyone
pumunta ka
else,
sa iba't
this should be
ibang
disallowed.
probinsya para mag-disperse.
Mr. Chair.
No?
But
Imposible
of course,
yun.
as mentioned again by
At
Attorney
gamitin
Camora,
naman natin
alam ko
yung,
baka naririnig
ano,
din na po
yung
kayo with all of
kahit
these
na-
questions
kahit na
for the ICFA, which are all
lisensya or kahit
redundant.
na
But
common
it just
sense para dyan
is
po.
an additional
Gusto natin na, dahil ito ay under
proof po
review, sinasabi
that
niyo,
what
hanggang
we're looking
kailan
at
po,
here
Mr.
are
Chair,
red flags when it
yung
comes to
review
acknowledgement
nito?
receipts. And I think we really should strengthen po siguro
hindi
the
pa po namin
DEPs that would be
masabi, Mr.
required
Chair,
for
since ang
confidential
mga
funds.
involved po ay
Kasi po, hindi po to
kasama
biro.
po
And if you look at it,
madalas. So,
precisely,
we
we're
will
talking
try
about
po
a
as
single
soon as,
payment for 400,000
Okay,
pesos
so,
as
Mr.
a reward
Chair, no,
payment.
I hope,
Which could be
yung
anyone because
COA
hindi nga po
would
signed.
be,
Kung sa mga
prudent
signatures
enough,
nga po,
ano, at
nagkakaduda
talagang
tayo kung
tignan niyo
totoo yung
talaga
signature.
kung
Paano pa kaya pag walang
ginagamit
signature
ng
at all?
Office of the Vice President
How do we know that this person
at saka ng
exists?
DepEd
These are some
before
issues that we should
itong
consider po,
confidential
Mr.
funds?
Chair, when we're going to
Thank you,
craft
Mr.
our
Chair.
legislation to strengthen po yung joint memorandum circular.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I would like to direct my questions to Attorney Camora of the Commission on Audit. And I would like to request also the Secretariat to flash on the screen the copies of the acknowledgement receipt to start with my questions. Ms. Camora, yung nakikita po natin dito sa screen ay dalawang acknowledgement receipts. Ano po? So, pwede mo ba banggitin dito sa unang acknowledgement receipt kung anong petsa ang nakalagay dito na kung saan ito po ay ina-acknowledge yung na nakatanggap tumatanggap ng nagkakahalagang 150,000 for the payment of reward. open and close parenthesis, medicines. Anong petsa po yung nakalagay dyan?
Mr. Chair, hindi ko masyadong mabasa. Para siyang, hindi ko sure kung November or December 17, 2022.
So hindi mo, pwede ba, yung secretariat, pwede ba i-zoom natin itong unang acknowledgement receipt? Ayan. So I guess it starts with the letter N
Yes, Mr.
and
Chair.
ends with the letter R.
R, opo.
So probably what month is that?
It's probably November 27.
November
27, 2022.
November 27, 2022. So let's move on the next acknowledgement receipt. Ito naman ay nagsasabi that this is to acknowledge receipt of the amount of 155,000 pesos for the payment of purchased supplies. Pwede mo ba banggitin sa committee ito anong petsa ang nakalagay dyan sa acknowledgement receipt?
12 December 22.
12 December 22. So it presupposes that this is December 12 of 2022, year 2022. Tama?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Ngayon, pwede mo ba banggitin muli dito sa committee ito, ano po ang period covered ng mga confidential funds na nirelease sa Office of the Vice President?
Yung sa fourth quarter ng 2022 po.
Fourth quarter of 2022 na kung saan ano po yung mga petsa ng utilization ng confidential funds?
December 21 to 31, 2022 po.
At yung mga ibang petsa na sumunod dito sa confidential funds that was released on the last quarter of year 2022?
That's it po. December 21 to 31, 2022.
Yes. Ano pa yung mga sumunod na petsa after year 2022?
Yung 2023 po.
Yes.
February 6 to March 29. That is for the first quarter. And April 25 to June 30 for the second quarter. Tas July 14 to September 30 ng third quarter.
So, malinaw, Mr. Chair, na ang pinakaunang confidential funds na nirelease sa Office of the Vice President ay may petsa na December 20 of 2022. Tama ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And ibig sabihin, walang confidential funds ang Office of the Vice President sa petsa na Nobyembre 27 taong 2022. Tama po ba yun?
Wala pa po, Mr. Chair.
Wala pa. Pati na rin doon sa petsa na December 12 of 2022. Tama ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, ibig sabihin nito, Attorney Camora, imposible na ang nakasulat diyan sa dalawang acknowledgement receipt na may binigay raw ang Office of the Vice President galing sa confidential funds noong November 27 at December 12 of 2022. Hindi ho ba?
Kung galing po sa na-cash advance, hindi po yan. Galing sa cash na advanced nung December 21 po.
21. Okay. So, imposible, no? Na
Yes, Mr. Chair.
yung cheque dated December 20, 2022 at na yung cash ng December 21 at yung utilization, in fact, December 21 to December 31. So, imposible na meron tayong acknowledgement receipt na ang petsa ay November 27 at December 12 of 2022.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, kung nandito ka po ba nung last November 5, 2024 hearing?
Opo yata, Mr. Chair.
Yes, and in fact,
Before
you were...
this...
Yes, before this.
Before last hearing po with the people pa from the OVP.
Alright. So, noong nakaraang November 5, 2024 hearing, na-establish na yung mga acknowledgement receipts na dated 2023 pero sinubmit para sa December 2022. Natatandaan mo ba yon?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And kung alam po ninyo, ilan ang mga acknowledgement receipts na dated 2023 na sinubmit
para sa confidential funds for the last quarter of 2022?
Hindi ko na maalala, Mr. Chair, kasi kayo po yata yung nagbigay ng data.
Actually, it was not me. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, it was
The committee
the
po.
Honorable Rog Gutierrez.
Opo.
So, around 150 plus acknowledgement receipts. Hindi ho ba? Kung matatandaan ho ninyo.
153.
150 plus.
Opo, parang
Acknowledgement receipts.
153 for 158.
58, to be exact. Can you please confirm with your records kung ilan po na acknowledgement receipts?
158.
158 to be exact, correct?
Opo.
So, in other words, ito pong mga acknowledgement receipts are another example of ARs na in-issue outside of the period covered by confidential funds. Tama ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Again, ano ho ba ang mali dito? Yung mga acknowledgement receipts or yung source of fund?
Yung acknowledgement receipt po.
Yung acknowledgement receipts bearing those dates that will not conform with the period that was covered by the confidential funds, correct?
Tama po, Mr. Chair.
So, sa palagay po ba ninyo, Attorney Camora, maaari ba natin sabihin na ito pong 158 na mga acknowledgement receipts, sa tingin nyo po ba ito ay due to typographical error?
Mr. Chair, ang binigay nila pong dahilan sa compliance nila is inadvertence po.
Inadvertence meaning pwedeng isa sa mga
kamali.
rason
Opo,
ay due
nagkamali.
to typographical errors.
Yes,
Tama.
Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Ngayon, after the acknowledgement receipts with questionable 2023 dates na brought up last hearing, can you please confirm if they were part of the notice of disallowance for the amount of 73.28 million?
Mr. Chair, parang hindi na po siya umabot sa notice of disallowance. Parang nasa notice of suspension po siya.
But they are part of that notice of suspension?
Meron po yata kaming observation na ganun, sir.
So, ibig sabihin, can we state that due to the questionable acknowledgement receipts that was discovered last hearing, it appears that there should be additional 17.6 million that should be disallowed. Anyway, these are matters left for the Commission on Audit to look into. Tama ho?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Would you like to enlighten us about this issue? Do you have something in your hand?
Meron po kasi yung mga pinoint out na kasi may mga na-disallow na po kami and then may mga na-point out during the hearing na questionable acknowledgement receipts. So, tinignan po namin kung ano tong mga to. Kung nakasama na ba siya sa disallowance or not. So, if hindi pa nakasama sa disallowance, pwede po pong mag-issue ng supplemental.
Alright. Anyway, Mr. Chair, I would like to manifest that of the total amount covered by those acknowledgement receipts with questionable dates, which is totaling of 26.32 million, there's an overlap with the acknowledgement receipts disallowed under the notice of disallowance. So, may mga natitira pa po na 17.6 million which does not overlap. And in fact, this is the additional amount which should be disallowed by COA. Tama ho ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to end my questions by moving that this questionable, dubious, spurious acknowledgement receipts be referred to the Philippine Statistics Authority to verify if the names enumerated therein really exist. I so move, Mr. Chair. Just to repeat my motion, Mr. Chair, I would like to move that this dubious, spurious, and highly irregular acknowledgement receipts be referred to the Philippine Statistics Authority or the PSA to verify the names enumerated therein if these persons really exist. I so move, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion to refer the dubious acknowledgement receipt to the PSA. Is there any second to the motion?
Second.
Duly seconded. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is carried.
Secondly, Mr. Chair, I would like to move also that the acknowledgement receipts be referred to the National Bureau of Investigation and the Philippine National Police for them to assist us in conducting a handwriting or signature examinations to verify whether the recipients of these confidential funds are real or not, with Miss Mary Grace Piattos as the first priority. I so move, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion to refer acknowledgement receipt to the National Bureau of Immigration.
NPM.
NBI, National Bureau
Investigation.
National Bureau of Investigation. Is there any second to the motion? Duly seconded. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is carried.
Mag-subscribe at i-click ang notification bell para sa mga susunod na video updates. Maraming salamat po.